Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to our in-depth dissection of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This is our fourth and final episode where we talk about the final three chapters of the game and the ever-divisive ending. Much like the previous game, the ending of this game has divided a lot of people, and we are going to go into it in depth. It's been a while since we've been back. I'm Steve, by the way, and I'm joined by my good friend Michael Pender.
Hello, hello.
Very, very deep and smooth. Thank you very much. As I said, it's been a while since we've been doing this. We had a very long break between our last episode just because we've been busy. But it kind of works in our favor because it means that all the really memorable bits stand out in our head, while the bits that we might have initially thought, oh, that's really cool, might have faded into obscurity. And that's actually something I wanted to ask you, Michael, before we even get started. Up until this point, we finished up at Nibelheim the last time. What are the big main standout moments of the game so far up to this point for you?
Oh God, now you put me on the spot. I think the Gold Saucer was great, although some of the best stuff in it is still to come, and we'll be covering in this episode. God, I think the Grasslands area I really enjoyed.
I'd have to agree with that. Yeah,
that open world was really good, and I sort of like Costa del Sol as well. When we were talking through this initially, we were saying it's such a pace killer, and it is. Like, it shouldn't be the way it is, but in the moment being there, I loved the cheesy fun of it. I thought it was really good. So yeah, those sort of moments really stood out to me. And there's probably like more subtle individual moments that I really liked, but I just can't think of them now. It's more like a town sort of that I liked, or an area like the Grasslands, I guess.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. I still feel the Grasslands, when you first are allowed out into the open area. I mean, it's the same for so many of these open world games, like Elder Scrolls Oblivion or Breath of the Wild, when you first get allowed into the open world. And it's a really breathtaking moment. For a lot of these games, it's like that. And this game is pretty smart in that usually when you're allowed into a new area, it is kind of a wow moment. Less so as it goes along. I feel like as it goes along, the areas get less impressive, strangely enough.
Yeah. Because you're used to them as well, and some of them aren't as graphically interesting. Like, I think the Grasslands looks great, and Junon looks great because you have the cannon in the distance, and it's got a bit of sea and a bit of, other areas. But then like Cosmo Canyon and Nibelheim are quite boring looking open worlds. It's all like red rock or grey rock, respectively.
Yeah, we were kind of down on those areas in the previous episode, all right. And I don't think our opinion has changed too much on those.
No.
But yeah, that, and just one thing. Well, I rewatched a few YouTube videos, and one thing I noticed when I was looking at it was, I really want to do more battles again. I forgot how cool the battle system was, and when I was watching just some of the fights, I was thinking, this just looks amazing. I really want to go back and play this again.
I think in our first podcast, sorry to jump across here, we were a little down on the battle system because we were saying it's a lot floatier than remakes. And I still think that's true, but there is something to it. And especially like once you're a bit into the game, it really clicks with you. And if you get a good handle on a lot of the characters, then it can be very fun. Especially some of the boss fights can be really good. I think this is when the combat really shines in the game.
Well, maybe with some exceptions, but we'll come to that later. I do agree with you, though. I do still think that Remake had, just because it was more solid, grounded, and simple, overall that battle system was better. But this one, it certainly has its merits. It's still one of the best battle systems I've ever seen in a game. Just before we jump into what actually happens in each chapter, one more thing I want to bring up is, at this point in the game, we have Vincent and Sid in our party. How do you feel about just them being here for pretty much the rest of the game and they're not playable characters?
I do think it was the right decision. There's an argument to be made that maybe Sid could have been a playable character, but that would have been just weird because his introduction in the original doesn't happen until Rocket Town. But because because I remember when in remake I was like, why isn't Red 13 a character? Like you play through, or a playable character, I should say. You play through so much of the game with him towards the end. But I think it makes sense because the way he's introduced as a new character at the beginning of this game um, means that, oh, you're starting afresh with him and everyone's sort of on the same sort of level playing field in terms of your knowledge of how to use them. So, from a mechanical point of view, I think it makes sense, and it'll be cool at the beginning of part three, whatever that's called, to have two new characters to use, especially Vincent. I'm looking forward to using him. But it is a little weird story wise the way
Yeah.
they're just around. Because especially Sid as well. Like I get what they were going for, and like it's sort of cute, the way he's used for traversal and fast travel, but I really liked the way he was introduced initially. Like the first thing you see of Sid in the original game was like him like a load of expletives and fucking what is it, sit down and drink your tea. Is that when you first meet Sid?
Shut up, sit down, and drink your goddamn tea. That was it. Yeah.
So yeah, he's a little more like kind uncle in this, which hopefully the next game redresses that.
Yeah, I hope he swears a lot more. That would. I'd fucking love that if he swore more.
I'd shitting love that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I think that from a gameplay perspective, it makes complete sense for them not to introduce two more characters. That would have been overwhelming in the last three chapters. But as you say, it feels a little weird story wise. I feel like they could have left Sid in the airplane. What's it? The tiny Bronco. It would have made more sense from a narrative perspective if, as you say, he was simply the guy who was driving you around. When he's part of the group and wandering around with them, it kind of shatters that moment of like, suspension of disbelief. Is like, why can't I play as him? If he was just, I'm just the driver, then it's kind of easy to separate the two. And Vincent, similarly, I kind of feel like he didn't really need to be there at all, because there's a lot of moments where they just show him literally just hanging around.
Being the moody and broody and stuff. Yeah.
Like in the Temple of the Ancients, you see there's a point where there's a cutscene and it's just him leaning on a pillar, watching them doing stuff. And I can't help but think, I know you're trying to justify the fact that he's in the party now, but why didn't you just have him stay where he was and introduce him again? Like you have another encounter with him at the start of the next game, and then he becomes part of your party. That to me would have made a lot more sense. But instead they have him come along and do nothing essentially for the rest of the game.
Yeah, that was pretty weird. And like the argument could be made that he appears late enough in the game that he could be a playable character, because you would have time to learn his mechanics. But we said the same thing about Red 13 as well, and they decided against it. Obviously they don't want to throw, it's so weird, they don't want to throw a new character at you, but they'll throw new mechanics at you in a level. Like every new dungeon has some new weird thing. So like we'll see that with the Temple of the Ancients. But interesting design choice, I would say.
Yeah. The first thing we have to talk about, I think, is at this point, at the start of chapter 12, before you even go to the gold saucer, you get a notification that basically tells you, do you remember all those mini games you spent the game doing? Well, there's more now.
Yeah.
How did you feel when this happened in the game?
Well, I guess maybe my timeline's wrong, but this coincides with the tiny Bronco's wings getting clipped and becoming a boat. So it opens up these new places, and we can talk about the boat in a minute. But I at this point I didn't engage in a lot of the updated mini games. Like I'm not going to go back and do the fucking Dog Rocket League again. I don't know if that got upgraded, but you know what I mean. It's sort of like I was pretty burnt out on the open world stuff, and I was just doing the bare minimum at this point in the game, I think. Now, when we got the boat, I did do some of the pirate treasure.
Side quests. I did a few of those too. Yeah,
and it was fun for what it was. But it was new. It wasn't like an upgraded version of the previous side quest stuff. So yeah, I wasn't really interested in doing it. Just a note on that pirate side quest, whatever it's called. I I love when it's first introduced. There's like an old parchment with some pirates on it, and one of them they're just basically classic monsters from the game with pirate hats and mustaches, and I just love that visual. It looked really good. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I wasn't like nobody at this point of the game was like, you know what, this could use a bit more side stuff. It's been a bit
Mm,
lacking on mini games and side content. It's absolutely bursting at the seams. Like it didn't need anything more.
yeah. Do you know what I realized? When this happened, my I had a oh, for fuck's sake kind of moment
Yeah.
where I just really, really didn't want that to happen because we were coming into the home stretch now. We all know at this point coming towards the end of the game, and you don't really want that stuff to be there because, for me at least, I felt the need to engage with it because I couldn't help but think, what if I missed something really important here? What if there's a really cool scene and I missed
Yeah.
it because of
Yeah.
that? So I remember I did all of it. I can tell you now, there's very little there really worth engaging with. It's mostly, I'd say almost a third of it is just fiend hunting.
Mm.
There's there's an extra coliseum. I think there's two coliseums there, and then you've got like little mini games, like the dolphin mini game opens up again. There's kind of a funny one with the thugs. Remember the thugs from the original game? Beck, I think his
Oh,
name was.
I think I
They kind
finished
of,
that line actually. Do you go back to Calm or did Air?
yeah, and they
Yeah.
have this kind of, they're trying to start a business, and you're basically like helping putting them on the right track, and it's kind of cool. It's okay. But
Mm.
again, nothing here was essential. It was all extra stuff. And I realized looking at this could have been fixed so easily if they just didn't have that notification. Like if they
Mm.
just didn't tell you that there was extra stuff to do. If they took the From Software approach, like where they don't tell you this extra stuff is here and people could discover it at their own leisure. So imagine, 3 or 4 months after the game is released, someone types in and says, oh, did you know if you go back to Calm, there's this extra side quest? And it's like, oh, that's cool. I wonder what else is here. But the fact that they bring it up on screen and they have this extra checklist for you to do, that grinds it to a halt. But if they just left it anonymous, not anonymous, but unsaid, and allowed you to discover it naturally at whatever point you chose, I would have loved it. I think that would have been incredible.
It's sort of, this game can't let there be any confusion about where to go, what to do, where it is. Like it's really handholdy in a way.
Mm,
And I I don't expect Final Fantasy VII to be, or like the remakes to be, some weird, like you mentioned FromSoft, and I don't expect them to be, like them where they throw you into the middle of a map and say, yeah, figure it out. I'm not going to tell you anything. But at the same
mm,
time, I would like the leash to be let off a little bit. Um, and even like you were saying, like it's not even they have to adopt somebody else's design principles. Like Final Fantasy used to be like this, where a secret would be you just had to go back somewhere and be curious about it to discover it was there. But now
yeah,
it's like
exactly.
another icon on the map and a notification sort of thing, like you were saying. So yeah, it does remove. There's zero sense of mystery in this game, which is fine. It's a weird nitpick, but yeah, it's true. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, like you said, in the original Final Fantasy VII, there's that cutscene that you get that tells you what happened to Zack, which is
Yes.
completely missable. And I don't think I saw that until my third playthrough of the game, when I saw something about it on an online forum. And that's the kind of stuff that I wish was still in it.
Mm,
But so many, game developers, they're not going to risk having their content remain unseen. They have to let you know it's there,
yeah.
because if you don't see it, then all that work was for nothing. As you say, it is a nitpick, but a valid one. I think I would like there to be more mystery. There, as you say, there is zero mystery in this game. It's all spelled out for you very clearly.
Mm. I don't hate the boat though. So, like, what happens
Hmm.
is the wing, like, I don't know, if inexplicably the engines explode on the tiny Bronco and it lands in the water. Um, like, I like it's the same with the buggy, as well. I like the sort of weight of the transport options in the game. Like, they feel nice to drive around. Like it's not crazy. It's not like simulation or anything. And for like the exploration is pretty limited that you can do. It's pretty novel being able to go straight across from Costa del Sol to Junin. That's pretty insane that you're able to do that. But apart from that, it's just like a few islands that you can go around for extra content, and it's a little bit checklisty for them, as in like, oh, you had a tiny Bronco boat in the original, so you need to have it now. But I didn't hate it. I sort of enjoyed driving around in it
Yeah,
for a little bit and doing those pirate mini games.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think it's a nice feeling to be able to go from throughout this game, you're going from area to area, and it does kind of feel like everything is quite separate. So
Mm.
once you get this tiny Bronco and you see that you can actually go from world to world with zero, not world to world, but different parts of the world without loading times, that is a nifty little feeling. It's a little bit like in the original game when you finally got, the high wind or something, and suddenly the whole world was open to you. It's very similar to that, and yeah, I think it works. I think it's good. Yeah. So then we get to the gold saucer. Now they're going here because they're trying to get the key to the keystone,
Yeah.
and Kate Sith basically tells them, "Oh yeah, Dio has the keystone, so we have to go in and get it." And we see Dio, who is beaten black and blue from this. He's looking really worse for wear, and we find out
He's still
that,
looking sexy though.
well,
Like
of course, yeah, he's got his
every
banana hammock out, and yeah,
all things
it's
considered, yeah. I don't know, I can't remember if I mentioned in the previous ones. I love his design. I love his performance as well. He's ridiculous, but like it just works for him.
that's the
Yeah,
thing. When this game leans into ridiculousness, it's usually at its best, but
yeah.
occasionally it leans too far, as we're probably going to get to very, very
Oh
soon.
yes, yeah. Excess,
Um,
really. Yeah.
yeah. So basically, Dio agrees to give you the keystone if you will fight on his behalf against Don Corneo's champion, because Don Corneo has come back and basically tried to lay claim to the gold saucer. And I forget exactly what the logistics behind this is, but for me, the logistics are it's a video game. Why not? Let's just have a bit of fun here.
Yeah, yeah.
So you agree to do that, and before you go back to the ghost hotel for a rest, but before you do, you find out that Aerith has won a competition to write a song for a musical that's happening that night.
Yeah, why
Um,
wait a minute, like given the context of the game, right? We're the world is going to end or something like that. Who knows?
yeah, this is one of those things where don't worry about it. It's a video game situation.
Yeah,
It's like, don't
exactly.
worry about it, man. Look, she clearly, while she was in the buggy, she was writing songs like that she was going to send off to. It's just one of those things that's kind of like whatever.
Yeah, fair, fair.
And yeah, I guess you go. Oh, by the way, who did you have a date with? Do you remember?
So yeah, you have your date now. I had Eris. Who did you
I had
have?
Aerith as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I
That
think I think that's thematically apt.
yeah, it felt right. It felt like not to use this word too strongly, but the canon version of it, especially since she dies later or whatever happens to her later. We'll get to that.
Yeah,
But like to have that moment, and I quite like the scene in the
yeah,
carousel or whatever you call it, the Jesus Ferris wheel. Yeah, Jesus.
yeah, yeah. No, it feels it resonates. I think they pulled that off really nicely. I think that was a almost pitch perfect translation of that scene into HD Blu-ray, whatever you want to call it.
Into
Um,
Blu-ray.
oh, fuck off. Yeah, and then you go to, is it Loveless? Is that the play that we're
It
watching?
is Loveless, and the thing, I like. I'll tell you my thoughts on the play, but it's so funny that this is what Loveless is. After all this time,
Yeah.
this is what it is, and I'm like,
Yeah.
the posters in the original is some lady in like a modern dress. Like it's not
Mm.
medieval sounding at all or Shakespearean looking. So, yeah, you go see Loveless, which is now a VR experience with
Yeah,
audience
now this
participation.
this is a very Final Fantasy VII collection thing, the whole
Mm,
VR thing. I would have preferred just a regular play, but whatever, I guess. We do have an opening before the thing where we see Jesse doing a musical number.
mhm.
And I have to confess, when I watched this, I had no idea it was Jesse until afterwards. And they made
Mm.
a whole thing of, wow, she looks so good. And I was like, oh shit, that was Jesse. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Did
because
you have that?
yeah, no, I had the exact same thing, and like it's like watching it back now, it's a lovely scene. It's actually really well choreographed to dance in it. Like
Yeah.
they obviously got somebody professional in to do
Mm.
mocap for that. But Jessie's main design thing is her red bandana. So when she's not wearing that, then
Yeah,
I have no
that's the
idea who she
problem.
is.
It's the China doll syndrome thing that like so many characters in these games have. Like pretty much every game post 13, every Final Fantasy game post 13, everyone looks so similar. It's really hard to tell them apart, especially the girls. They all look so similar,
Yeah, yeah.
and they usually differentiate by costumes and hair.
Mm.
So when she had just like long brown hair, I was like, oh, she kind of looks like Ares. Okay, whoever.
Yes.
But yeah, when you look back and you know that it is Jesse, you're like, oh, okay. As you say, nice scene and a nice little throwback to the original game. Like that didn't necessarily have to be there, but I liked it well enough.
Mm.
Yeah. So, what were your thoughts on the medieval loveless play thing?
I actually really loved it.
I'm glad I had the exact same reaction. Yeah, I loved it too.
It's there's several things I love about it. One is the characters turning up, like Kate Sitt as the jester sort of announcer guy, and Barrett as the evil Valendross or whatever. I can't remember what his name is.
I don't know.
I thought it was really good, and one of my favorite parts is that Cloud's line readings of all the flowery language is very, very stilted and wooden, because that's how he is. He wouldn't be able to perform that well. I really enjoyed the sort of rhythm action button press thing as well. Those scenes were really cool.
Yeah.
The sort of visual and the fight choreography was great, and it was like enough to keep me engaged, because it is meant to be an audience participation VR thing, I guess, so it works in context. They were very easy though. I was surprised that the parade in Junin was way harder.
Oh yeah, way harder. But I think that kind of speaks to like the what's the word I'm looking for? Not the loyalty, but the staying true to the original. Because in the original game, it is literally you just make one or two choices, you know.
Yeah.
But what I really liked about it was this is one of the moments in the original game where things get so wacky that you have to think, how are they going to translate this into the remake? And admittedly, tonally, this feels a little bit odd, but it works. You know, it does kind of emphasize how wacky these characters can be. And yeah, it's a little bit oddball, but I love it because everybody leans so hard into it. So yeah, no, I think that this part was absolute triumph. Like it could have fallen flat on its face, but no, I just thought it was excellent.
I also really love Cloud's armor design. I really wish you could have unlocked that in the main game because it looked sick.
I was about to say the same about Barrett's one. I love him as like the bad guy. He reminded me of Garland, the original bad guy from the first game. That's kind of very, and I think it might even be a little homage to him. But yeah, oh god, it's just really fun. It's one of the things I love going back to, and it's amazingly well done. Like the opening scene of Cloud in the prison cell looks phenomenally good. It looks really, really fantastic. So
yeah.
Right.
And then we have Aerith's song, which I believe was sung by the voice actress for Aerith. Might be wrong about that.
I'd actually like to know that. I felt didn't really like it, to be honest with you. Okay. I think the song by itself is a good song. I just felt like Aerith coming out to sing the song kind of went against her character. Like leaning into the dumb loveless play, like everyone kind of having fun and all that. Yes, I can see that. That's everyone like having a good time. But her stepping into the spotlight and saying, okay, I'm going to sing this song now. And it's very po-faced. It's not supposed to be for laughs. It's supposed to be a serious moment. Didn't feel right, personally.
I like the song as well. It's got like a 90s Celine Dion ballad vibe to it that I think suited the scene well. Do you know, I don't fully agree with you, but I see where you're coming from, because it was all a bit like, you know, everyone gets their turn sort of thing. Because everyone got to be in the loveless play, and then Aerith gets her thing, and it was a bit weird that way. But one part I did like about it was that it did focus on Aerith, because a lot of the game doesn't, and that's sort of a flaw of the game, given how the ending sort of revolves around her. Yeah, so it's I maybe it's misguided attention, as in like I wanted more Aerith and to either understand what's happening with her or have her involved in more of the main action. But this is, I'll take this, I guess, whatever this is.
Yeah. By the way, I just looked it up. Apparently, it wasn't the voice actress who sang the song, and I did think it
Oh,
sounded a little different because Aerith has such a like breathy, oh, I hope I can do this kind of voice, whereas
yeah,
this one was
fair.
very powerful. So, I I do agree with you that it's kind of important for there to be a big focus on Aerith now, but again, misguided. Like another thing that happens at the end of this song is she sees like a vision of
Oh yeah, I hated
yeah,
that.
of Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, and
Mm,
this just seemed like a complete fumble because I
mm,
couldn't help but think Aerith met those people like once in
yeah,
passing,
yeah,
and she's like breaking down because she sees like them in like the afterlife. That to me, that just did not ring true at all. I felt like they were trying to find a way to connect her to, you know, the live stream as a way of foreshadowing what happened later. And this was their attempt at doing it. I think they could have just instead done the exact same thing, but just shown her mother.
yeah. Wouldn't she have more connection to her mother than she does to fucking Wedge, who she met once, and his arse was probably on fire. And but I hate
His arse was
the
always on fire.
yeah, he loved that. He died doing what I loved. But I also hate the how cheesy it is because they sort of wave and it's like, oh, we're okay to be dead, that sort of thing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't like
I,
that.
I will say the closing of that scene where they all come together and they're all in their dumb costumes and
That was nice. Yeah,
Cloud kind of goes like, "Come on, let's go take a bow," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine. I like that." It's just again, it's misguided here. Like, yeah, it's not again not a deal breaker, and the fact that the song is good helps. It's
yeah.
a good song, and that kind of carries it through most of this kind of misguided scene.
Do you know the one thing I'll say in its favor is this game feels like it should have a character sing a song at some point. It's got that vibe to it in a way.
That's what end credits are for.
Yeah, fair.
But yeah, after this, I think everybody goes to sleep, and then the next day is the Colosseum stuff.
Oh, just before that, just one word on the scene. I haven't watched the other characters' scenes, actually, the date scene, I should say. Um, so I want to check those out at some point. But the one with Aerith I thought was really good. I know we were talking about, but one part of it I really liked was she sort of it brings up those interesting themes in the game of Cloud acting like Zack because she said he
Mm.
carried himself like him, and that being this sort of that sort of part of the game I really enjoy when it's not mixed in, and I know it has to be, but when it's not mixed in with like Genova cells and multiverse and live stream and all, when it's like more of a reflection of somebody's like I don't know disassociation or like response to a traumatic experience because that's sort of relatable in a way, or like there's some real world grounding in it.
So what you're
Um,
saying is you like it when it's acting more like the original game as opposed to the stuff the remake brings to
yeah, well, the original
it.
sometimes maybe it's because of its minimalism, but it sometimes is like, oh, it was Genova cells. That's the reason for a lot of
Mm.
things. And I get that it's okay for there to be a narrative reason for something that isn't the same as the thematic or metaphorical reason for it, but I just like that because it speaks more to Cloud's mind in a sort of personal way. And at the end of the day, there's that nice moment where she's holding his arm or something. He says, "Oh, just till the end of the ride." It's this
Mm.
weird human like, I know this is weird, but I need something. I need this grounding of something familiar because I'm unstable at the moment.
Yeah, it's
So yeah, just
like you
like that.
said before. There's a lot of moments in this game where it feels like there should be more focus on Aerith, and I really think the only reason they don't do that is because they're trying to convince you that what everybody knows is going to happen won't happen. Well,
Yeah,
to be fair, nobody knew exactly how they were going to deal with that moment at the end, but they were definitely trying to like feed you a couple of red herrings so that you didn't see like so they do less focus on Aerith as a way of throwing you off the scent. But that kind of hurts the overall narrative, I think.
Yeah.
But the moments that she does have where she does stuff like this is really, really nice. I do agree with you. On a side note, I did go back to try Yuffie's one. So there's a really handy option once you finish the game where you can go back, and rather than having to redo the entire game to make sure your relationship works out right, you can just choose which date you want to go on.
Oh, that's handy.
Which I was so relieved by. Yuffie's one, incidentally, is really good, where she tries to kiss Cloud, and Cloud gets like a little like whoa, much like the original. But then she has this really like collapse of self-confidence where she's like, oh, maybe I'm like not bringing anything to this. And then Cloud really playfully starts going like, I forget exactly how it goes, but basically she's doing that thing where she pretends to punch people, and he's just acting like, "Oh, you got me! Oh, you got me!" And it's very cute. It's very cute. I like it a lot. So then they go to sleep, and then it's the Colosseum stuff. Your speaks volumes.
You can already guess how I feel about this, but yeah.
Well, okay, so I think this is of two halves. Well, first thing I have to ask, you mentioned off mic, you mentioned music. What do you think of the rap song that the two guys do at the start?
Steve, I don't know what answer you're expecting. I loved the rap song that the two guys.
Oh my god, I did as well. I thought it was really good.
Because I playing Remake, those guys come up a little bit in the Colosseum, and they're funny, but they're not used too much. But they're way funnier in this game, I thought.
Yeah.
I know they're not in the game a lot, but it was so obnoxious, and sort of like the cheesy rap rhythm that they have as well was really good as well. It's very like late 80s, early 90s, and I really enjoyed it. It was very on brand for them.
Yeah, and
I love this kind.
This kind of speaks to the vibe that they're going for in this chapter for the most part, where it's all about excess. You know, this the first time we went to the Gold Saucer, I think in the previous episode we mentioned how it felt like so much because we've been playing so many mini games up to that point, and then we got to the Gold Saucer where it's more mini games, and it just felt a little bit exhausting. This chapter feels like what the Gold Saucer was kind of supposed to be, where it's all overblown and over dramatic and everything is just explosively ridiculous, and it works up to a point. I really like you fight a couple of random battles, and then you have to fight Corneo sitting on top of Abzu's head again. And I like that. But then the Turks come.
Yeah.
This bit I mostly am down on. I think this is a bit stupid. Just to sum up my feelings on this, like the Turks bit, kind of stupid. When Rufus comes in, really fucking stupid.
Yeah, it's
is like that your feelings as well.
No,
yeah,
it's mainly like I think narratively it doesn't work. I think in terms of pace, it's really clunky because it comes at the end of a prolonged series of battles, and then there's this weird pause, and then you have another series of prolonged battles. And mechanically, it's tiresome. You don't feel the same. By the time you get to Rufus's battle, you fought like 5 or 6 battles in a row.
Oh, more, I'd say.
With like a little cutscene in between. And I really liked the Rufus fight from Remake on top of Shinra
this cheapens
Tower.
it.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like, oh, let's do that again. And it isn't as fun this time as well. I don't know what it is about it, but like, I was just burnt out from all the battles in a row.
Yeah.
You know?
I think you're right. I think it's a simple case of momentum. The Rufus battle in the original game, like it's building towards, I mean, you're literally climbing a tower. You get to the very top floor and this is the guy you fight. Like it's a really, really thematically and emotionally climactic fight. Whereas in this one, it's a drawn out fight. Like it's a dumb epilogue tagged onto something that didn't require it at all. So yeah, and it's very obvious that people obviously liked the Rufus fight in the original game, and it's really obvious that they said, well, let's do it again. Let's just find a reason to put it on again. It doesn't work. The Turks fight, they stand on both sides of the line for me. Like it's kind of ridiculous, and they're sort of ridiculous as well, and it kind of plays up to the relationship that Avalanche and the Turks have, where they're kind of playfully always jabbing at each other,
Mm.
and that's emphasized even further by them bringing in a literal bench and vending machine
Yeah.
for you to sit on. That I can't tell if I love or hate that. Like it's so
Yeah.
ridiculous that I'm like, what the hell? But I don't know. Like I don't know how I felt about that, but that felt like the real pinnacle of it to me. And I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing.
I think you fight the Turks way too many times in this game. Like it really underlined it when you fought them again in Temple of the Ancients. And I was just like, I'm done with this. Like the fights feel so similar as well.
Mm.
So yeah, but the bench, it's funny because you mentioned previously how annoyed you were when benches turned up in ridiculous places, like what is it, the Guy in
Oh yeah, the Gee's like homeland place
yeah,
in like the that
yeah.
seems really ridiculous.
But this time I thought it was funny, like that the Turks brought it out.
Yeah. They're pushing it though. Like I could have completely done without the Turks battle and Rufus battle at this stage. I
Yes,
feel like if
yeah,
they just ended it at Corneo, it would have been a better overall experience.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But then after that, you have this weird little mini game where you're chasing Kate Sith all over the gold saucer, and it's kind of funny. It's goes on a little bit too long, I think,
Mm,
but it's fun. And then you have that emotional moment, well, semi-emotional moment at the end where he gives the keystone to Tsung, and then
mm,
everybody basically says, "Right, Kate, you're an arsehole. We don't like you anymore, and you're not in the party anymore." Um, yeah, it's. I think it's handled better than in the original. In the original, it you kind of feel like I don't know. It's they kind of clunkily shoehorn in the whole bit with I'm holding Marlene's daughter hostage,
yeah.
and that just feels really against character for Kate Sith.
Oh yeah, it's so yeah. Clunky's the word for it, and it leaves a bad taste in your mouth because you're meant to like
Yeah,
accept him again, especially after the Temple of the Ancients. But like, it's like, oh no, I can't forget that you fucking blackmailed us by threatening, like, sort of implying that you would kill Barrett's daughter. You know?
yeah. Like it's you do. I mean, because you get so much information in the original game. I don't know about you, but I found that eventually I forgot about it, and that was
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
But at least in this game, it's we're skipping ahead a little bit, but there's a point in the final chapter where you're walking towards like the final battle. And Kate Sith walks alongside Cloud, and basically he says, "I apologize to everyone except you. I just wanted you to know because I knew it was going to be dangerous. I thought it was better if the Shinra went in instead of you guys." And I was
Mm.
like, that's actually really good reasoning for why he did it. Like, and it allows him to keep his cover in Shinra. And I think, yeah, you actually do a pretty good job of justifying that entire betrayal in this. So fair play to them for that, I think.
Yeah, it's a little more elegant. The original game sort of they wrote themselves into a corner and they were like it was very clunky, like you said, and it was almost like they wanted you to just forget about it after it happened. It's like, oh yeah, everything's back
Mm.
to normal. Don't worry about it. You know.
Yeah, no, the
Um.
relationship in this one feels a lot more fluid.
Mm,
Yeah, so then we're in chapter 13. Now, this is a long one. This is basically the Temple of the Ancients. One thing before we get there, one thing I absolutely love is you have to go up well up north to get to the Temple of the Ancients. And I love the way the sky gets much, much darker as you're traveling
mm,
along. I thought
mm.
that was a really nice touch. Um, yeah, so before we before we get here, right, when you get to the Temple of the Ancients, this is long. This section is really, really long. How did you feel about this section?
Wait, what in particular? Before we enter the Temple of the Ancients, or
No. So okay, so maybe I've skipped ahead a little bit. Like before we get to we have a really cool cutscene, I suppose, of the temple basically constructing itself once Song puts in the keystone. And it looks pretty epic. It's very cool to see all the individual stones floating up in the air, rotating, and eventually building the temple by itself. It looks
mm,
very ominous, much more so than in the original. Um, and this is the thing. This is a key thing that I think is important in this game. Whereas in the original game, the Temple of the Ancients was a mysterious place. In this game, it's an ominous place.
yeah,
Like it feels dangerous and oppressive, much more so than in the original.
the original was a little silly because the little guys running around in their hats. but it also had a very cool like Escher style upside down
Hmm.
staircases thing going on. Um, this I love some design elements of the temple this time, like the live stream sort of what would you call them, gusts of wind that
Yeah.
are an obstacle at certain points. I think they look amazing, and the way the green light reflects on Cloud's character and all is just like I probably took more screenshots of that than anything else in the game. And yeah, the certain design, like the room where you find the black materia as well, looks amazing.
Yeah, that was really good.
Overall, I didn't really enjoy this dungeon that much, I'll say, for a couple of reasons, but I'd say you could sum it up best as probably too long, and I didn't need any more mechanics, which is just was something you could
Yeah.
say about the entire game, really.
Yeah, that's true. The whole thing, there's a whole mechanic they introduce here where Aerith basically learns how to commune with the live stream, and they gamify this, I think, in a completely needless way.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to go around collecting like fragments of live stream or something in order
Mm,
to have enough energy to commune with, I don't know, the live stream in general, and make bridges or open doors and stuff like that. It's it's just not great. It's similar to Kate Sit's box throwing bit in Nibelheim. It just feels like something that's there for the sake of being there, and it would have been probably a lot better and beneficial to the game to just cut it. It's made even worse by the fact that the way they pace this is really bad.
God, it's horrible.
Um,
Yeah.
so it starts off strong. It starts off like pretty good, where you're going in and you're seeing how mad the place looks. You can see the Turks upside down in front of you
Mm,
and all that. That's fine. The problem that I have, and it's a very, very small thing, is they get separated. Half your team, like Aerith, Yuffie, and Red 13, they get separated. They fall down a hole or something.
mm,
And then Tifa, Cloud, and Barrett, they're on a different path. And in particular, there's one point that just exhausted me so much. It's so first you play as Cloud's team, then you play as Aerith's team, then it's back to Cloud's team, then back to Aerith's team.
mm.
So the second time you're playing as Cloud's team, you fight the Turks. And then there's a cutscene where you fall down and you meet up with Aerith, Red 13, and Yuffie. And you're like, hey, you guys almost crushed us, but it's great to see you again. And then you just see like a title card that said several hours prior. I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, are
Yeah.
you seriously going to make me play through that? I was so annoyed when I saw that. I was like, that was completely unnecessary.
But yeah, it's just painful. Like there's nothing gained. There's no narrative reason. It's not like I'm fascinated about how they got there. You know?
Yeah. And because while you're right, a lot of it looks very beautiful. It is also quite samey
Yeah.
throughout this, and it gets boring. It gets pretty boring around this point. And again, if you had to include it, just the order in which you play as certain characters, changing that up would have solved that problem. Because first you play as Cloud, Aerith, Cloud, Aerith.
Mm.
But when you separate, if you'd gone straight to Aerith first, then Cloud, then Aerith, then Cloud, it it not wouldn't fix the problem, but it would have made it so much better. Because again, that bit was less fun than just simply playing as Cloud, where you're just fighting people and getting through obstacles. So that would have done some work to alleviate that, I think.
Yeah, and like I don't know. It's just why did we need more box pushing puzzles in the Temple of the Ancients? They bring back what was it, the Mako cleaners or something like that, but they're now big balls that stop the live stream. It's they've
Yeah.
it's just this game is so big that they can't keep a handle on everything. So weird shit like this gets overrepresented, and
Mm.
like who's designing these fucking moving a box games and thinking, yes, let's bring this back in the game. This like people will be wondering where's the box mini game, and we'll bring it back in the Temple of the Ancients.
Where's
But
Poochie?
yeah, you're completely right that like narrative callback thing that they do with the two of them meeting up is completely unnecessary, and again just makes this a trudge, like a slog to get through. It just goes on for way too long. Um,
I suspect this was there was separate studios working on separate parts of the game that just weren't colluding enough. So there was definitely like a section saying, right, your job is Temple of the Ancients. You just do take care of this. And because they had not enough communication with other teams, they didn't realize how long people had been slogging through the game at this point. They were like, we have to make this like a little mini game unto itself.
mm,
Um, on the plus side, like just to highlight some things, I know you were saying there are too many fights with the Turks at this point. I will say, I think this particular fight with the Turks is probably one of the better in the game. The cutscene before it is really cool. It's very Advent Children-y, very over the top, but I really enjoyed it personally.
yeah, and like I can see the appeal in any one individual fight with them, because like sometimes
Mm.
it's fun, and like they're not like uninteresting to fight in terms of mechanics. It's just that there's too much of it throughout the entire game.
Yeah, I think if you stripped away the one in the gold saucer, enough time would have passed that would feel okay. Yes, now we can justify fighting you guys again. Personally,
Yeah, yeah.
because from that point, I think you haven't fought them on since is it Gongaga or maybe even the Mithril Mine? Maybe
Mhm.
it's been a while at that point. At least after this point, you basically get to after the fight with the Turks, things get more interesting. I think it picks up after that
Yeah.
because you fight the Red Dragon boss, which, in my opinion, is awesome. I love this fight.
The boss fights in this area are sick. They were in the original as well. I really like them. Red Dragon looked great and
Yeah.
was an interesting fight as well.
Yeah,
Um,
the fact that he can manipulate gravity is like a really well, not manipulate it, but the fact that he's standing on the roof at first and he flips gravity around so you fall up to him. I thought that was
mm,
fantastic. Incidentally, the Red Dragon is one of the few bosses in the game who like killed me twice. He was actually really tricky because he has a move where he covers the entire floor with fire, and it's
mm.
pretty hard to dodge. Took me a while to figure him out. So yeah, I
I
thought he
think I
was
died
excellent.
to him as well. I think overall I died a lot less in this one than in remake. Not that either are very hard games, but I found this one a little easier, I think.
I think I was the opposite. I think I found this one a
Mm.
little harder, but that might be because I played hard mode in remake
Ah,
at
okay.
the second time around, and I was kind of got more used to the mechanics.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Um, Another thing at this point, they're really hammering home the fact that Cloud is very possessed at this point.
Yeah.
He has a scene where he very brutally murders a soldier,
Mm.
which is it's kind of a natural progression from in the first game when he threatens to kill what's the name of the guy with the red hair?
Oh God.
Uh, Johnny.
Johnny, that's it. Yeah, the most generic name.
I was like, the guy, the soldier from Metal Gear Solid. Yeah, no, he whereas in that game it's just kind of a glimpse at the darkness behind his eyes. This time it's no, I'm just gonna start killing people now.
Mm.
And he even says he has a line where he says, don't think of it as death, it's more of a homecoming. And
Yeah.
then sure enough, Sephiroth shows up later. He says the exact same line, just in case there was any chance of any ambiguity. It's really obvious. Quite heavy handed, but I think they kind of save that at the end. Here, like I was kind of iffy on it. I thought you guys are playing your hand way too early here, but I think they do save it in the end. What are your thoughts on Cloud as generic possessed puppet at this point?
I think something you brought up before I do agree with is there's way too many Cloud grabs his head moments because he
Yeah.
has a massive headache. Um, I do like that in the subtler ways, like even going throughout the Temple of the Ancients, like when you get split up from the other party, Tifa and Barrett are like, "Oh, we got to save him, right?" And Cloud's like, "No, we're here for an objective," and he does it
Mm.
in sort of a cold way. So I like that they're like setting the groundwork for that. Like it's not too sudden. It's a little sudden, but it's
Mm.
not too sudden. And I quite like the voice actor's delivery of that line that you mentioned. To think of it as a homecoming or something like that.
Mm.
Um, it was very cold, and it sort of suited it, and it didn't. It's not like he put on evil voice. It was Cloud's
Yeah,
voice. You
yeah.
know, he always speaks that way, but he's being the emotions drained out of what he's saying, which is
Mm.
even more chilling than if he had like really leaned into it. So I mostly think that's done well, and we'll talk about it at the end. I don't know if we'll agree, but I think one of my favorite aspects of the ending is Cloud's psyche, for want of a better term.
Yeah,
Um,
that's going to be a whole thing we'll get into. So we'll just
but
put a pin in that for now.
mm,
One thing I want to bring up here: there is a scene with Vincent at this point. The after they beat the Turks, and Cloud has a whole thing where he goes to kill Elena before Tifa stops him, and
mm.
then Vincent wanders in, and he just has a moment where he says, "Death doesn't suit a Turk." And I just remember thinking, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
Like I get that like he used to be a Turk and the whole idea that he's sort of undead, but what's the point of that scene? Why does he wander in? Like, is he there to save them? Is he there to mock them? Is he there because he's a drama queen and he just likes to be all broody and dramatic? I don't know. Can you help me out here? What was the deal with that scene?
Is the game just reminding you that Vincent exists and is in this area with them and is against Shinra? I guess. Like, I don't know if it's that simple. Yeah, there's less like that's the whole thing with the game is like, did we need this thing? Because
That's
if in the Square offices when they were making the game, if anyone ever asked that question, the answer was always yes. Put it in the game.
yes.
There's very little on the cutting room floor, I'd say. So, yeah,
A vegetable
unnecessary.
gremlin, an electric gremlin. We need a bat gremlin. All of these things are actually in the movie. Yeah, no, it's very over the top, and now we get to one of my favorite parts of the game. This is where we get to in my head, I call it the cloister of trials, which was what they called it in
Mm,
Final Fantasy X. But this is the bit where everybody needs to go through their own trial. And I think I was looking back on this and I realized the room itself is actually shaped like a big clock. And I
mm.
realized that this is in the original game, there is a room
Oh yeah.
that has like
Okay.
a big clock hands. Now, obviously, very different purpose in the original game. It was just some of these rooms have treasure chests, some of these have monsters, and one way is the right way. But here they've repurposed it a little bit. And we also see Sephiroth stab Sung through using one of his black robes. I think at this point, I don't know if we've said it before, but at this point, Sephiroth can kind of possess the black robes at will and just
Mm,
use them to kind of be a bit omnipresent, I
mm.
guess. But yeah, he stabs Sung, and Sung. Aerith has a really emotional moment with him. What were your thoughts on that? Because I felt like that was done well, but
Oh, I did as well. It's weird because of their relationship, but like she's known him since she was a kid as
yeah, I
well.
think
So
as you say, yeah, contextually it feels odd, but also apt. Like
yeah.
you can't, you. It's weird that she's kind of crying over this guy who has caused her a lot of hardship, but
Mm,
as you say, she's known him since she was tiny. So yeah, and it's done quite well, I think, because just the language she uses. Like I love at one point she says, "I never hated you," you know.
mm,
So that's a really nice line because it kind of tells you a lot. Because yes, they had an antagonistic relationship, but it wasn't hatred. There was
mm.
some level of compassion there.
Yeah, I think like a lot of scenes in this game, it's a little overwrought, but oh no, it didn't feel jarring. It felt like they had earned that moment, even though they're not fleshed out too much. I like Sung is like somewhat more like screen time in this game than he did in the 1997 original game. So I felt like I knew both characters a bit better. So it wasn't so much of a. It's like if Cloud was crying over some random Shinra soldier he killed, you know. Um, so yeah, it lent it a bit more weight in this game.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. From this point on, I'm probably going to be bringing up a lot more quotes because I feel like there's a lot of really good lines from here on in, or at least very interesting lines. And one of the best ones I think happens immediately after this and speaks volumes of how good the voice performance is. It's after Sung has walked out, and this is a very emotional moment between Aerith and Sung. And then Cloud chimes in and very deliberately says, Aerith, I need you. And I think the use of the word I as opposed to we is
Mm,
so good there, because it really highlights the fact that something is up with Cloud at this point. Because if this was a normal scene and he wasn't possessed, he definitely would have said, we need you now.
yeah.
But instead, it's like, Aerith, I need you. I think that was really, really good.
Yeah, the writing is like pretty good in the game, I have to say.
Hmm.
There's like even the sort of bantery stuff is really good. When Vincent
Mm.
joins the party, Barrett says, this is a very different tone, but when Vincent joins the party, Barrett says, oh, great, another loner. And Cloud's like, yeah, another one, I know. And then everyone's like, no, we're talking about you. you
Yeah, I
know?
thought that was good too. I like that. Yeah.
And this as well, like those sort of subtle different, like you're right, because I think that's a very deliberate choice of I
Mm.
versus we.
Yeah, I think this something I really admire about Square, whoever the writers were for this, is they use subtlety very well, which is not something they were famous for before this. They were
Yeah.
very obvious about what they were doing, and now they still have some very obvious scenes, but yeah, no, they managed to imbue a lot of subtlety into the writing, which I think was great. There's a very interesting line here where Aerith, she's kind of communicating with the live stream, and she says a couple of very generic mysticism words, but one thing she says at the very end is, Forget not thy ire, for it shall remake thee. And I could not help but roll my eyes a bit at that, because like that's lit. I don't think that means anything except, hey, it's a remake.
it's it sounds like some kind of hot tub time machine. I fucked that up. I can't remember what the original quote is. But yeah, whenever they can like just completely shoehorn the title of something into it, it just, hey, that's the name of the show. Um
Yeah.
but yeah, it is what it is. I won't begrudge them that.
Yeah. Now, at this point, we have the trials, and we have six members go in for the trials. Red 13, Tifa, Yuffie, Barrett, Aerith, and at the very end, Cloud. They all have their own trials. Three of these I liked, three of these I didn't. Can you guess which
Oh.
ones I didn't like?
Um Barrett's?
Oh no, I love Barrett's. This is my
Yeah,
favorite.
I'm trying to think which ones you didn't like. Because I sort of didn't hate any of them, if I'm being honest.
Oh, I'll be honest now. Well, there's one I really didn't like.
Go,
This,
just leave. We're on tenterhooks here, Steve. Tell us which ones.
Okay, well, first one that I didn't really like, well, yeah, didn't really like was Red 13's one. And the reason for this is it doesn't fit thematically, because Tifa, Yuffie, Barrett, Aerith, and Cloud all lose somebody, and they
Mm.
all talk about loss at the end, and it's very clunky at the end, because Aerith has this speech about we shouldn't bemoan the people we've lost, and then it's like, pause, or the things that happen to us.
Yeah, no,
you know.
I hated that at the end because I would have preferred if they didn't feel like they needed to wrap a bow on it. Like I'm completely
Yeah,
okay with this being everyone revisits trauma. It doesn't because like
yeah,
what happens to him, like he does lose something. You could say like he loses his innocence, he loses his connection to his homeland because he's captured. Something like that. No, they didn't need to put a big bow on it at the end like that. That was more egregious to me than because I liked Red 13 scene actually, like of him being captured is interesting in a way.
yeah. Just to underline this now, the scene itself I liked, but it just didn't fit when it came to the overall package. Um, One that I was iffy on, not again. This one, now this is one that I had the least problems with, but I was kind of like, was Tifa's one, and this is just because we had seen this already, and it just
Yeah.
didn't really do much for me. It was okay. So this is Nibelheim. Everything's burning. Cloud is there. He points at your dad. Blah blah blah. It's like, okay, we've basically seen this exact scene already. I get that you need it to tie the whole scene together, but I would have liked if they just did something a little bit more interesting with it. There was nothing there that really grabbed me.
I don't think we learn anything more about Tifa from it, which I think is the most disappointing part of it. I didn't mind because it was interesting seeing her perspective on it, but it's not like we gain any new information about her or how it affected
Mm.
her, other than underlining that this was a really traumatic thing for her because it's often framed for Cloud that it was a big traumatic thing. So being like,
Yeah.
oh, also her fucking family died and her village got burnt down as well. But yeah, it was fine. You're right.
I think what I could put it down to actually, it might just be the performance because that scene where she's kneeling by her dad and saying, Shinra, Sephiroth, I hate them all. It's like you could have framed that in such a way where like that could have really tugged at the heartstrings, but it did nothing for me. So
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot there, really.
yeah. And the last one that I don't like, and this is just kind of a problem I have in general, is the Yuffie scene.
Hmm.
Yuffie was never a girl who was like supposed to be, the tragic heroine or anything like that. And yet that's kind of the way they're placing her here. I don't know if you recognize this. So the scene that she has is the DLC from Remake. Did you play that?
Yeah, Intergrade, and I sort of like that because I did recognize it when she starts that section, and I
Mm,
thought, oh wow, oh cool, I remember this from the end of the game. Um, the problem is not everyone will remember that or have played that.
mm,
Um, and yeah, I to be honest, I maybe would have preferred it if we got like a glimpse of Wu Tai and stuff that
mm.
happened there. Like I can't remember her backstory in Wu Tai. Does she get cast out, or does she leave of her
No,
own volition?
she leaves of her own volition because she's trying to basically reclaim Wu Tai's former glory.
Yes, yes, okay.
Like this is literally why she's like a materia treasure hunter. Like she's trying to, raise money and stuff for them, which is in itself a good idea. It's an interesting arc, but instead they give her this guy, Sonon, who is
Yeah,
like the most generic, like Sora from Kingdom Hearts kind of guy. Like I could tell you nothing about him except for he is kind of a love interest of Yuffie, and that's pretty much it. I just felt like he was an unnecessary addition, and they could have just, as you said, shown something from Wu Tai, which would have been much, much better. But then we have Barrett's scene, which might be the best one. I love this scene.
mm,
It's so good because I love Barrett's whole history with Coral. I think that's like the beating heart. Well, not the beating heart, but like has a huge emotional impact on him as a character and the general themes of the game, when it comes to pollution, eco warriors, and that kind of thing. And there's so much happening here in this scene. Like when you go there, the first thing obviously you notice is, oh, he's got his arm again. Cool.
yeah, yeah, that was
And
cool.
not just that, but everyone is being pointedly really nice to him and say, "Hey, good job there, Barrett. You that new Mako reactor is going to make our lives so much easier." And then you see his wife, who I think at this point we hadn't seen before,
Mm,
and it's like this really, like you're kind of with him on this journey of like, oh my god, this is all so new and amazing, and I love this. And then he literally opens the door and it's all gone.
yeah, his
He
arm is gone again, and
his arm is
yeah,
gone, people are dead, and his wife is lying there in his arms, and it's so traumatic. It really feels like this is this isn't an illusion. This feels like PTSD.
yeah, no, and I like the fact that they took something from the original, which was Barrett's got a gun arm, and like that's it in the
Mm.
original to a certain extent. You learn how he lost his arm, but they sort of explore like there's a certain trauma in losing a limb. I'm sure, and
Yeah.
they don't get too in depth to it. It's not like 127 hours or something, but it does explore that. Like we talked about the scene with Dying, and when Barrett has his gun arm taken off, he feels a lot more vulnerable. Like it's
Yeah.
very like just a powerful image in a way for to have that taken off you, like your gun appendage. So yeah, I quite enjoyed the scene as well. Mechanically, I just don't like the whole hold down the button thing. We talked about this before to move debris and stuff like that. But no, yeah, it was a very interesting scene.
And then finally, we have Ellert's scene, and this is basically how she loses her mom. And it feels very natural to have this being the kind of the thing to cap it all off.
Mm,
I like this too. I thought this was really good. I especially liked how this is kind of sort of subtle, but it kind of ties into the way the original game ended. A big part, spoilers for the original game, which is what 30 years old nearly at this stage now.
Yeah, yeah.
But a big part of that ending is the question: do does the world deserve to be saved based on like the people who live in it? Look, are people good enough to be saved, or are they not? And there's kind of a little microcosm of that in this scene
Mm.
where Aerith is looking for a doctor, and she bumps into this group of horrible bastards. Basically, one guy bumps into her, and like in a 80s style bully comical style, is like, and stay down there, brat.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like, it's a bit unrealistic, but I still like it though. I think it's because it's really drawing a line under like, okay, there's shitty people in this world, but then you meet Elmira, who's a really good person. And it just kind of goes to show there are many different types of people in the world. And there's lots of people around who are just neither of those two things. You just bump into
Mm.
them and they just kind of say, sorry kid, I can't help you. And yeah, it just kind of underlines that fact. I think it's a nicely done scene. Not as powerful as Barrett's, but it serves a purpose.
That whole like ridiculous, like, yeah, stay down, brash thing really annoyed me at first.
Yeah,
Um,
it is over the
because
top.
it's so over top, and it felt cheap to me at
Mm,
first. Now my mind did change, but it felt like, oh my, this is the most like manipulative thing, putting you in the shoes of a child who's calling for a doctor to help their dying parent, and people are being cruel to you. That's like
that's
horrible
insane.
thing to do, and it's very cheap. But maybe I'm being too generous, but I'm thinking it's a child's perspective. I'm like, in reality, maybe they weren't as horrible to her, but this is how her
Ooh.
memory is shaped about it, as in she needed help and she couldn't get it. So she thinks of it as everyone turning their back on her. And similarly with Elmira, she thinks of her as an angel almost, who swept her into her arms and like just took her in. So
Hmm.
maybe it's the way memory works. I could be meeting this way more than halfway.
I feel
Um,
like that it sort of falls apart a little bit because Elmira is done in a very grounded sort of way. She just kind of
yeah, that's fair
appears as
actually.
she was, whereas the
Mm.
other people are just comically mean. Um, yeah, it's like, well, Earth, Darsh, that kind of thing. But yeah, no, I think while it is overblown, I think it does the job nicely. And then we have Cloud. Oh, actually, sorry. Before this happens, they all come back into the central chamber where Cloud is.
Mm.
And here, Aerith has a little speech. Now, this is where I think things start to go a little bit off track. Things start to get wildly out of control, and Square Enix kind of lets their hands off the reins a little bit. And it's supposed to be chaotic, but it's very confusing. But my understanding of what is happening here is Aerith is telling everybody that it's important for us to grieve. We can't. She says something about we can't think of death as a homecoming and imagine people are with us because it's important to grieve. This is something that we have to do, and we can't just pretend it doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
this kind of serves a dual purpose of, kind of comforting the people, but also saying, hey guys, maybe Aerith is going to die later. And it's good because for up until this point, they've been throwing red herrings at us, like doubting us, doubting us, doubting us. But here
Mm.
they're kind of drawing us back towards what's happening. It's like, hey guys, maybe she has to die if we want things to proceed the way we need them to. And I like that because it's really because up until this point, we've only been thrown off that path. So it's very easy to think, okay, she's probably going to die. But here they give us a clue about what's actually going to happen, and I think it's pretty good. Like,
Yeah, and there's always throughout the game, been this thing of, does Aerith know what's going to happen to her?
yeah,
Um, and I find that interesting in a way. I wish I wouldn't mind a little more clarity on that. Like, not everything needs to be spelled out, but to to us to know at least, did she have some knowledge? Is this a sacrifice? Maybe in the original it is as well. I'm a bit hazy on that, but I don't know. Just if she's aware of this on a level that the others aren't.
yeah, it's it's hard to say. I always just kind of see her as being a mouthpiece for Square Enix more than anything else. Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't think she actually knows, but all anytime it gets very mystical and you don't really know what's actually being said, it's basically
Mm.
Square Enix saying like, who knows what will happen. Um, but another great thing that happens immediately after this is we have another fantastic moment that just showcases how brutally cold Cloud is. Because as soon as she finishes this long spiel, he just goes, "You finished?"
Yeah.
And that's so brutal at this point because we know she's referencing her own death. And the fact
Mm.
that he's so callous and just saying, "Come on, let's go," it just feels it's a little bit like, oof, if you only knew, man. If you only knew.
Yeah, yeah. And it comes back in a way like just his attitude towards the end.
Mm.
It I like that they didn't overemphasize. Well, it's not subtle by any means, like
Oh
how
no.
rude he is, but it didn't need any more words as well. So,
Yeah.
so it's effectively written.
So at this point, they start heading down a corridor towards the Black Materia chamber. But before that happens, Cloud has kind of his own. I think only because it says there's a little thing, like it's the current mission that you're on. Like that little
Mm.
marker pops up and says Cloud's trial. If they hadn't said that, I wouldn't have known this was supposed to be a trial because it just looks like a random flashback, which is a bit meh. But basically, he just has a bit of a flip out where he looks back on all the damage he's caused, all the people who have died, and how he hasn't really emoted much. Nice enough throwback to when Jesse died and he didn't cry or anything. And Sephiroth saying, "Why didn't you cry? What's going on with that?"
Oh, is it
And
Biggs or Jesse, or maybe it's both?
oh, it
Actually,
could be both. I don't know. He jumps around a bit there, so it's kind of hard to say. He just has a few scenes where
the
he's
one thing I like about this, not the one thing, but there's one thing I like is at the end of this flashback thing, there's the image of Cloud in the flames as opposed to Sephiroth, the iconic image
mm,
from Nibelheim. So sort of like that framing of that. It's again not subtle at all, but
yeah.
it doesn't mean it doesn't work.
And yeah, again, we're speeding up here now because like it's all kind of culminating here, and a lot of
Mm,
the stuff that we see here gets a little bit samey. But basically, yeah, at this point, Cloud is almost full possessed. He has his last kind of moment of normality where he looks back at everyone else and he says like, "I'll never be like him, never." And that's kind of the
mm,
last we see of like regular Cloud for a while. Yeah, and then we get into this chamber and we see Sephiroth floating down, and Cloud goes to attack him, but then we get attacked by Demon Gate or Demon Wall or
mm,
whatever it's called.
mhm.
Um, this fight was really easy.
Yeah,
Did you
well,
find
like
this?
in comparison to the original
Yeah,
is like an infamous. That's the first time I played through the game. That's where I got stuck.
yeah.
Um, and
Famous
it's
difficulty spike there, I think.
yeah, exactly, and it's a lot easier here because like it's difficult. How do you translate this into this combat system and make it as challenging? Because it was the turn-based nature of it that really made it challenging. In the original was the countdown to when it would do its like really powerful move.
Mm.
Um, I did really enjoy that there's two of them. That was
Yeah,
sick.
that was
I didn't
that
see
was a
that coming.
really nice surprise. And I love it when they do stuff like this. This is
Mm,
definitely one of the strengths of this game because almost every boss has a little surprise like that. And I think this one, yeah, it was cool because it doesn't reveal itself until you chip down about half of its health. So
mm,
yeah, it was very good. And the ending as well is great because we see him absolutely lose it. And it almost looks like he breaks down a stone wall with his sword. Like he's
mm,
freaking out on this stone wall. Like, and he's gone at this stage. He's completely vacant in the brain there at that stage.
mm,
And we have a bit more of a traversal here, I think. There's like loads of images of the Cetra and human ancestors and the Gi telling a bit of history, which is nice. It's a nice little slowdown.
mm.
And then we have the Black Materia getting that thing. It gets really messy at this point. Like it gets to people listening here, like this is going to sound very nonsensical. If you haven't played the game, trust us when we say it is nonsensical. So much
Mm.
happens here. Multiverses get involved. Things happen, but then reverse time prevents it from happening. It's insane. So
Yeah.
take it all with a pinch of salt, I guess. So at this point, we basically walk into the black materia chamber, which is basically Cerebro from the X-Men movies. And
Yeah, I do like the design of this. I think it looks really cool. The sort of the way the roof comes down and all, but
it's very
yeah,
ominous looking. It kind of it gives me a vibe of, you know, when you're on stage and you know there's like loads of people watching you, but you can't see them because the lights are on you. That's kind of the vibe I get from it a little bit, which I don't know if it's intentional or just says something about me psychologically, but either.
let's not read into that too much.
No, we'll leave that for another. We'll do a fifth podcast where we just like evaluate me and my psychological profile.
Sick.
Nice touch that happens here actually is you switch control from Cloud to Aerith, and you're walking behind Cloud as he's walking up to the Black Materia, which, you know, is a nice way to kind of emphasize how detached, you know, we are from him at this point. And again, just to emphasize how insane he's going, he kind of starts giggling like a frat boy who just farted as he gets close to the Black Materia. He's like, and yeah, so we know that, you know, he's up to something hinky.
Hinky.
I don't know. That's a word. That's a word that people from the 50s use. I think.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to. I'm kind of blanking a bit here because things kind of repeat a lot here. I feel like Sephiroth shows up at this point. Am I right in thinking that?
He shows up every 5 minutes, man.
He's he's like black mold or cockroaches. He's just all over the gaff. Yeah, no, he shows up and we have. I presume he shows. I actually can't remember if he does or not. Oh no, sorry. I'm getting this wrong. He doesn't show up at this point. Basically what happens is Aerith freaks out when Cloud reaches for the Black Materia, and she's like, "No, don't do it." And he just takes it anyway. Classic man. Am I right, ladies? So yeah, he takes the Black Materia, and then, as we know from the original game, this is a trap. And the entire temple starts shaking, and we know it's basically about to collapse here. Somebody says, put it back, and Aerith has a really interesting line here that we need to revisit again. But she says, it doesn't matter if you put it back. Besides, it's a fake anyway. And I don't think this is broached again. But yeah, she says that Black Materia is a fake. And Cloud looks at her and says, no, you're just trying to mess with me. And after that, it's like that line is forgotten because it's like, no, this was the real Black Materia. Did you get this at all? I was very confused by this.
I don't know if it's like a reference to the fact that it's like the trap element of it, as in the whole temple is the Black Materia, and the actual thing he was holding was the trap element of it, because the whole temple has to coalesce down into what is the Black Materia. Is that it?
Yeah, because that's how it is in the original game, but I don't really think it's adequately explained. And this is one of the rare times where I think the original game explains something better than they do in this point.
Yes,
because this all gets lost in all the heebie-jeebie multiverses-y stuff at this point.
The hinkies, yes.
The hinkies, as it's colloquially known. We'll call it the hinkies from now on. But yeah, it gets a bit mixed up, and it's very confusing as to what actually happens with the Black Materia. But we get a cutscene where we see we can't sit. I can't do a Scottish accent, but
that sounded like a horrible Irish accent, which is where you're from.
Wait,
how?
I'm what? I am. Yeah. Can you do a Scottish accent?
No. Let me. Okay. The Black Materia? No, sorry. Sorry, Scotland.
Donkey, put that Black Materia back now. That's
okay. One or two words in that were good, actually. So,
yeah. Okay. Anyway, so Kate Sit runs in and he kind of stops there's a little platform coming down basically, and it's implied that when it hits the floor, then the entire place will collapse. And he kind of jumps in between the floor and this platform and keeps it up. And he's like, run, you guys got to get out of here. At this point, Barrett and Tifa have kind of slapped Cloud around a bit for acting like a nonce.
Wait,
Another,
now, sorry, just so you know, a nonce doesn't mean what you think it means. A nonce
numpty,
is
numpty. That's
yeah,
the word I was
numpty.
looking
Okay,
for.
cool. Yeah. Just to clarify.
Sorry, yeah. Sorry. I want to pedal that back. Sorry, numpty.
Numpty, yeah, cool.
How many times can we get numpty into this podcast? I wonder.
It's hinky and numpty, yeah.
Hinky and numpty. We call that no. Anyway, yeah. So he gets slapped around a few times, but notably he picks up the black materia as they're running out. Notable because I don't know what that actually means. Yeah. So they sprint out. The whole place collapses around them, and it's very. I think that you fight a couple of battles on the way out here, but nothing like major. It should be noted at this point, you fight a couple of cool enemies on the way in. You fight an Iron Giant and a couple of other like classic Final Fantasy VII enemies. And they're all really tough at this point. But on the way out, luckily there aren't too many. They don't overwhelm you because they know this is a climactic moment. So they let you kind of, for the most part,
it's an Uncharted-esque chase out of or not chase, but like escape from the thing. And
yeah.
I do like I can't remember when they cut back to Kate Sit struggling to hold up the platform. I really like that.
They do
image.
they do that like twice. And yeah, it's good. It's really, really nice image. Yeah, and they make it outside. The entire place collapses. And yeah, they're all good. At this point, Barrett kind of grabs Barrett grabs the black materia away from Cloud, kind of saying like, "What the hell were you doing? This is worthless," or whatever. And Cloud has this really like whiny baby moment where he says like, "That's mine."
Yeah.
And it's emphasizing how absolutely helpless he is at this point. Like he's just completely at Sephiroth's beck and call. And Barrett just tosses it away, says, "Go fetch it then," because I think it's common knowledge to everyone but Cloud that this is a fake, but he still believes it to be real. And when he tosses it, it rolls up to the feet of Sephiroth, who's just appeared behind them. Now, this bit I liked, I have to say. There's a bit here where you kind of walk towards him, and well, actually, I'm not sure if I like this bit or not, because the black materia kind of gets passed back and forth between Sephiroth and Cloud. And I'm not really sure what the point of this is, because Sephiroth kind of drops it on the floor, Cloud picks it up, and Sephiroth kind of says, "Now bring it to me." So unless this is just as a way to emphasize you're under my control now, which I guess is what he's doing.
And it's a bit ambiguous, for want of a better term, what the fuck Sephiroth is at the moment, because we know in the original he's able to project himself, because he's actually in the North Crater. But in this, does he have to embody one of the black robed guys with the tattoos on their arm? Does he have to like be one of them? Because later on you see that he does that with the Glenn character. I think so. I don't know if it's like he can't pick up or he can't physically get it himself. So he needs Cloud to give it to him, or maybe it's a power thing, like you're saying, like to emphasize you are completely under my control. So bring it to me.
It definitely seems that way. It definitely, if you had never played the original game, I feel like the understanding would be he has to possess a black robe in order to be present. Until the end. But again, we'll come to that. Very slight tangent here, something that just popped into my head. Do we ever see a female black robe?
No, I don't think so, unless one of the ones that are with Roche. But no, that's a good point. I don't think we ever do. No.
And follow-up question, because the tattoos can be anywhere. Do you think any of the tattoos have ever been a tramp stamp on any of the black robes?
I think under arse would be probably more like a cattle. What do you call that? Not
brand.
Prod brand. Yeah, that's it.
There you go.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a good joke.
Okay, joke section complete. Tappity, tappity,
Yeah,
tappity.
exactly.
Okay, moving on to the analysis. Yeah, so at this point, Aerith runs up and she kind of grabs the black materia away from Cloud. And again, at this point, it does seem like Sephiroth is basically trying to exert his power over Cloud, because instead of, grabbing it from Aerith, which he could very easily do, presumably, he just whispers to Cloud, like, if she takes it away from us, we got to get it back. And he's just kind of like listening blindly. He says, okay, here I go. And he walks along this like tendril thing.
I don't know where these vines came from, or what are they? Whisper things or something? I can't remember.
This is part of the Hinkies at this point.
Yeah,
or actually, to go back to when in the previous podcast when we were talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake, this is what I think we dubbed the Kingdom Hearts flavored nonsense. And this is where it starts coming in thick and fast. Like, a lot of this stuff is nonsensical. You can pull it apart and you can justify a lot of it, but this is Kingdom Hearts related nonsense, Kingdom Hearts flavored nonsense / the Hinkies. So these vines grow out of nowhere, but I like the whole thing where you're playing as Cloud and you have to walk up to her to basically, take it off her. It's a little bit like that section in the original game where you're forced to walk up to her, take out your sword, like raise it above your head. And, you can, the only way to not do that is to turn off the game. Like, you're complicit at this point, which I like. I think that's a nifty little section.
There's also a really cool, it feels odd for me to point this out, but a really cool camera move when, so after Cloud gives the black materia back to Sephiroth, Aerith's being like bombarded with whispers and it looks like she's going to fall. And you see Cloud come back to himself and sort of snap out of it. And they do this thing, I forget the name of it, but it was made famous by Jaws, where the camera sort of zooms in on someone's face, but at the same time pulls back. Yes, something like that, where it's just like, it's used to denote someone like gaining knowledge or coming to their senses. Really, really nice camera move and sophisticated use of it, I should say. Like, just and a general thing, a lot of the cutscenes are really well directed as well.
Not to actually you here now, but I think the first time they used that was actually Albert Hitchcock in Vertigo.
Oh, well, fuck me then. Yeah.
Well, fuck you indeed.
No, actually, I'm going to actually you. I said popularized by Jaws, not used first in Jaws. There you go.
Are you saying Albert Hitchcock was not popular? Not with the ladies, anyway.
He gives them the hinkies, I'll tell you that.
He gave everybody the hinkies.
But yeah, that was sick. I sort of like, I know there's a lot of nonsense happening in the scene, but I sort of like this scene. It's very dramatic and emotive.
It's a little restrained. It's not over the top. It gets blown wildly out of proportion later. But here, I think they're still showing a level of restraint. And that's why, and because all the actions that are happening here are important, they're relevant, and they're emblematic of like certain things happening. So yeah, I think it's done quite well. It's just like, it's a hint of what's coming. And here's the thing, we're going to get to that. But Aerith basically like falls and Cloud catches her. And there's this moment of, oh, you saved me, thank God. And then another camera thing, if we're going to be ranting about our favorite camera movements or directions, let me just throw mine in. I really like this moment where like Aerith is smiling like with relief, says, oh, you saved me. And then a black feather floats into the frame. And it's like, oh, I like that. Like, it's one of the black feathers are something that I really don't like overall, but that was one of the times where I thought, ooh, that's nice, because he's right behind Cloud now. That was cool. And he basically does one of his gigantic sweepy sweeps and chops the tendril thing off, and they just fall down. I'd like to say down to somewhere, but it's just down into downness. And that's the end of that chapter. We're going into the last chapter now. We should probably talk about what's been happening with Zack at this point.
Yeah, so we've been flashing back occasionally to him and in his alternative reality, and him and Biggs have been sort of getting to know each other, and he's helping Elmira. And there's also that whole part, I don't know if we covered it, where Marlene has some sense of that Aerith's going to die. I can't remember where that scene happens, but
that actually happens at exactly this point. So well done, Michael, for remembering a thing.
There you are, yeah. I just remember that being like, is she the fucking kid from The Shining or something? Like, why does she know this at this point? for plot convenience, but I know.
Yeah, this is the point where I admire what Square is trying to do, but their execution gets very sloppy at this point. They're doing something really interesting, but they're basically fucking it up. Is the is because like this bit, it's much like the original game. This is probably the most interesting part of the game, but also the sloppiest.
Mm,
It's just all over the place. Now, at this point, yeah, basically what happens in these entire three chapters. I'm going to exclude the ending for the sake of we'll talk about the ending later.
hmm
But Zack is basically looking after Cloud, and he's befriended Biggs, as you said. Marlene has this moment where she's talking about, oh, if Ares wakes up and Cloud isn't there to save her, she'll die, which is kind of nonsense. Like that's a bit all over the place because it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I
mm,
think it's supposed to be hinting at the multiverse. Like I think what they don't explicitly say, but you're supposed to get from this conversation is there is a multiverse here.
yeah.
And in one version of the universe, Cloud saves Aerith. So he has to be awake in order to save her. How
Mm.
Marlene knows this is completely lost on me.
Do you know what?
Um,
I don't want them to explain it either because that's just wasted time later for something that's not important. Just let's say that like she fucking dreamt it or something. I don't care. I don't
yeah,
need her to have ancient powers or something. You know?
that would be yeah. No, I agree with you there because I feel like they could have handled it a little bit better, but
Mm.
definitely don't explain it any further because as you say, leave it as a dream. All of this, if you explain it as a dream, kind of works. Kind of. Um, and yeah, so Zach basically he decides to go see Professor Hojo because he thinks he might have a cure for Cloud. But when he gets on his motorbike, he finds a note from Biggs, which basically says, you know, I took what you said into account. Previously, he said, you know, you're not worthless. You can do some good in this world, blah, blah, blah. And Biggs basically takes this as, I better blow up another reactor. Um,
Yeah, completely
so,
misinterpreted his. But what I love about the note is he doesn't he say it in some ways like keep away from the Sector 6 reactor today or something, which is basically the equivalent of saying, oh, I like you, don't come to school tomorrow. You know that meme about school shooters? It's just
yeah.
really, really weirdly done.
I've never actually heard of that as a meme before.
Yeah, well, like,
I feel
that's the
bad
world
for
we live
laughing
in.
at it now, but there,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. But yeah, no, you're right. It is a bit odd the way it's phrased. Like, yeah, and it's such a complete misunderstanding. But again, whatever. It basically boils down to forcing Zach to make a choice. Now, this is really important. I did not get this the first playthrough around. I only got this recently. But
Mm,
everything that's happening at the start of this chapter is trying to hammer the message home to you that no matter what choice you make, the results are going to be the same. Destiny is always going to snap back towards the way things are supposed to be.
mm,
Um, this is badly explained here. It's interesting idea. They do it actually in kind of well with the Cloud and Aerith bit because for Cloud wakes up basically back in Midgar and he's on a date with Aerith.
mm,
And it's some kind of weird alternative reality. Now, I did not pick up on this the first time I played it, but you have these options to stop at a toy stall, a candy stall, and like a photographer. And at each of these stalls, you're basically asked, hey, choose one of these, choose whichever one you want, but you only get one per customer. No matter what you choose at each of these stalls, the result is the same. And I did not
mm.
realize that the first time around. I think that's quite clever, but very easy to miss.
Yeah. The other interesting detail is that Stamp is different. The mascot,
Mm.
and
Oh well,
that's their shorthand for you're in a different universe,
yeah.
apparently. Which is like it's sort of difficult because they did that at the end of remake as well. You see when Zack is at the end with Zack, you see a poster for Stamp, and he's a different type of dog, and it's
Mm.
that's meant to be your clue to we're in a different universe or a different timeline or whatever you want to call it. But like, I Stamp wasn't something in the forefront of my mind Like I
Just for
couldn't
people
draw it from.
listening, in
Mm.
case they're wondering what the hell Stamp is, Stamp was the dog who is the mascot for Avalanche, which is very easy to forget because it happened so long ago.
No, he's the mascot for Shinra, I think,
Oh,
or some other
see, there
company.
you
But
go, completely
yeah, but
wrong.
he's reappropriated in some ways by Avalanche. But yes, that's an interesting element that they do that. But it's sort of like, why be subtle here? Just be more explicit about it. Like,
So yeah, and this is the thing because I feel like it comes down to padding again, because again, every section is so bloated that the points like this the choices and all these things are so far apart that the repetition of this theme of your choices don't matter don't hit home because they're so far apart. The only reason this clicked with me is because I was watching a YouTube video at double speed trying to refresh my memory, and I saw this theme reoccurring. I was like, oh yeah, the same thing keeps happening. Like, yeah, you pick you pick a toy or a hair clip, or jewelry. Sorry, it wasn't a toy; it was jewelry. And no
mm,
matter what happens, the person says, "Oh, we're actually out of that one. Why don't you take this one instead?" And Eris will be like, "Oh, actually, yeah, I like that." And if you go for a candy, you'll be like, "Oh, sure, you can have that. By the way, I've got these too," and you'll always pick that candy. And for the photographer, you choose a pose. And no matter what pose you choose, the photographer never takes a picture of you. He always takes a picture of someone else.
yeah,
So no matter what you choose, the result is always the same. And to reflect that as well, in Zach's point, he has this really obvious moment where he's in a tunnel and says, "Okay, to the left is Sector 6, but to the right is Hojo. I can save Aerith, or I can save everybody here, or I can save Hojo." And it's really obvious at this point, but the stuff in the I don't know, the fair, like that doesn't tie in as well because it's too separate and different, you know? It's all jumbled. And but what I like about that is in both of those sections, something very similar happens. Like at the reactor, the scene ends with a bunch of Shinra soldiers showing up and going to shoot Zack. And in Hojo's lab, a bunch of soldiers show up coming to shoot Zack, and it's kind of playing, reminding you of how Zack died in the original, just a bunch of
mm,
soldiers shooting him. And there's another scene a little later where he's outside a church, and this confused me no end the first time I played it, where he's thinking, Aerith, Cloud, or Biggs, who do I save? And I was like, did you not already make this choice? Like what? And
yeah,
again, we're supposed to believe each one of these scenes with Zack, like where he goes to save Biggs, when he goes to save Cloud, and this one where he hasn't decided. These are all separate worlds, and we're
yes,
just that's not clear at all at this
no,
point.
I don't know. Yeah, like could there have been an easier way for them to do it? Like it would have been ridiculous if like Zach's hair color was different in every universe or something like that. I don't know, but like just like don't present this then if you can't elegantly, because I don't want to have to rewatch something to get this, you know.
Well, I honestly just think it's bloated, you know, because there's so much like the bit with Cloud and Aerith, like there's just lots of walking around in between this bit. Like just have it
Mm,
as a short cutscene or something. But I suppose you do. But yeah, have it as cutscene with that one choice in the middle. That would have made it a little bit easier, I think.
mm,
But anyway, after all this happens, Aerith basically. Oh, Aerith has this moment where sorry, there's a scene that I have to bring up that I didn't like, and I have to emphasize this. When Marlene is talking to Zach, there's a bit at the very end where Zach says, "So does Aerith like Cloud?" And Marlene's like, "Yeah, she really likes him." And like Zach looks really like, "Oh, okay." And like the implication here is that okay, I've lost out to Cloud.
mm,
Um, Now you can say this is just in this one world, but I really hated that because one thing I loved about the relationship between Cloud, Aerith, and Zack is that it's really ambiguous, like where any of their emotions lie.
mm.
You know,
And
it's really ambiguous, and add into the confusion the fact that Tifa, just Tifa and all of that nonsense, like all that
yeah,
hinky stuff.
all that hinky. I think the thing I liked about it was it seemed like there was some connection between Cloud and Aerith, and obviously they play up the love triangle, both love triangles, as in Zack, Aerith, and Cloud, and then Tifa, Aerith, and Cloud. But really, Aerith's just transposing her feelings for Jack onto Cloud. So it
For
sort of
Jack.
ties for Zach. Sorry. Oh, you don't know Jack.
I'll
Did you
never
not meet
let you
Jack
go,
in your
Jack.
playthrough?
The
Yeah.
bit where Zack and Aerith are on the door and there's totally room for them, but then Sephiroth pulls him down under the sea.
But that was in a different universe, so that's fine. But no, she's transposing her feelings for Zack onto Cloud, and that ties into that really interesting stuff I was talking before about Cloud embodying him because of trauma
Mm,
and for various different reasons. So that I found interesting. This is just confusing, and it's a bit
yeah.
like teenage soap opera y, maybe.
Yeah, I didn't like the whole idea of Zack getting hung up on the idea of like Aerith likes Cloud because again, like Zack is not a character I'm massively fond of, to be honest with you. Like
Okay.
he's very like he's nicely written, but like the game really wants you to love Zack, and I just like Zack, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Me
Um,
too.
so the Zack that I know in my head, he wouldn't get hung up on this. He wouldn't be the kind of person who would see Cloud as a threat. He's a cocky guy, like, and he wouldn't be, oh fuck, she likes Cloud. Oh no, like he just kind of like whatever. And also, like, he's kind of a playboy. He's kind of a like cocky guy. So even though he like, I don't know, like what I liked about the original game is you don't know their relationship very well, and here it's explored more, and the more it's explored, the less interesting it becomes.
Because Zach's very one dimensional in a lot of ways,
Mm.
and I don't think they add any dimension to him other than by having more versions of him in different worlds.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. Yeah, but Cloud and Aerith go back to the church in their little dream sequence, and
Mm.
Aerith gives Cloud the white materia in her world, in this particular world, and then she kind of pushes him into a portal or a black hole that appears in the flowers.
Yeah,
Again, don't read too much into it. The writers didn't. And
yeah,
Sephiroth is kind of walking up behind her. Now, this is okay. I like this. Okay, the fact that like, oh, okay, she's gonna die in this universe too, and this is what it's all building up to.
mm.
And then it just kind of cuts back to inverted commas reality, and Cloud is back in the world that we've been in this entire time, and he kind of has this fuzzy recollection of events, and he wakes up in like the forest of the ancients. There's a brief scene here where he kind of sees Sephiroth and Aerith, and again, very confusing because they're just talking nonsense at this point. Um, and it's all just kind of hinting at like worlds colliding, worlds dividing, multiverse, blah 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 blah, the hinkies.
Mm.
And then he kind of wakes up in the arms of Barrett, his one true love, and they're kind of heading towards the Forgotten City. Just to take a quick breather because we've gone through a lot there. Like, what up to this point? What are your feelings so far? Because this was the most nonsensical part for me. I appreciate what they're going for, but
Mm.
horribly mishandled in my opinion.
I really, because like if you take a step back, everything we just experienced beyond the thematic stuff you're talking about, how destiny and people trying to push against that, everything that just happened was so that Aerith could get the white materia.
Hmm.
Basically, she had to go through these multiverses and get somebody to give it to her to then bring it to her in this world. All that crap, right? Um, Unnecessary because in the original she just has it. It's something her mother gave her, and it just exists. And you don't need all this nonsense. Um, so it's sort of what you said. It's bloated. It just doesn't need to be there. And I sort of guess how it's like laying the groundwork for the ending, um,
Hmm.
which we can get into. And like you can't divorce the two of them, but it's poorly told and pretty convoluted. Now
Hmm.
that doesn't mean there's not parts I like, or like I didn't mind the little scene going through the market actually because it's nice in a way because like of what's going to happen and the lost cloud's going to feel like to be reminded of their connection in a way.
Yeah.
Um, and there's certain elements of the multiverse stuff that I even like in the ending, but this it didn't need it. That's the
Yeah.
thing. This is all unnecessary.
That's the final point of it, isn't it? Like, there's bits of it that you can like, and some things are done well, but for the most part, a simple remake would have done the job, really. Um, and the Yeah, and here's the thing. I thought Aerith had holy materia in this game. Did she not?
No, it was because she gives him like an empty materia, like a clear materia that because holy had lost its power in this world or something like that. It's all getting lost in the hinkies basically.
Yeah, and
Um,
again, this is a point of contention here because if this is something that we can't remember, then like you need to be clearer about this.
yeah,
If
yeah.
because I didn't even realize that until you just said it, that the reason all that happened was so that she could get holy. I did not cop that at all. I was
Well,
like,
like,
oh,
and
okay.
I could be misinterpreting that, but that's how what happens. Like she gives holy to Cloud in
Hmm.
one world, pushes him through the white area, and then he
Yeah.
ends up back in quote unquote our world and gives it back to her.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, but
Would you
yeah,
like to hear a mad conspiracy theory that I have?
yeah, do it.
Oh, it's super mad now. You sure you want to hear
It's not about 9/11, is it?
it? No, but it does have the word seven in it. So do you remember in the original, not the original, but remake,
Yeah.
and there's the bit at the very end of the game where Cloud and Sephiroth are fighting on the moon, as you do.
Mm.
And at the very end, Sephiroth has a line that seems to be important, even though it doesn't really mean much. But he says something along the lines of, hang on, I wrote this down because I knew it would be important. He says 7 seconds until the end. That's it. But what will you do at that time? Now, again, this just kind of seems like a nonsense thing. And I kind of thought he just said 7 seconds because it's a way of saying you don't have much time and it's Final Fantasy VII, so we'll use seven. Very, very random thing. So I looked up the scene of the original game of Aerith's death.
Mm.
The moment that the camera starts panning upwards towards Sephiroth and the moment the sword hits her is exactly 7 seconds. This is a very, very deep cut. I think I might be
You've lost
reading
it.
way too much
You
into it.
are tinfoil hat territory, my friend. I don't know. It could be deliberate. Who
It
knows?
could be because, like, I'm thinking, what he's trying to say is you've got 7 seconds to do something, and at what point in the game, at any point in the game, are they trying to be like, when would you want to do something to change something? Of course, it would be Aerith's death. So the fact
Mm.
that there is exactly 7 seconds between the camera panning upwards and the sword hitting her chest, I think that's could be something. I could be massively overreaching. Conspiracy theorists, leave your comments in the comments below.
I want to look at this clip
We
now.
leave a we'll insert this into the YouTube video if there is one, and
Yeah,
we'll
and
just like
people can
yeah
make their own. Get out your stopwatches, guys. But yeah, it's a lot of nonsense as well. That's the thing
yeah
to remember.
absolutely. Yeah, so at this point they're doing the walk towards the Forgotten Capital.
Mm.
Again, this is one of the areas where they bloat the rest of the game so much, and it kind of costs this part because you don't really get to explore the Forgotten Capital at all.
Yeah, I
Um,
didn't, and I also didn't like that there was enemies here because in the original there's
mm,
no enemies, and it's got a
yeah.
really interesting atmosphere. That fantastic music starts in there. I can't
Mm,
remember the name of the track, and you explore it, and it's an empty city, like it's completely abandoned, and it's got this sense of dread, this really still dread that's
mm.
happening. Like the silence is deafening in a way. Um, but now you got enemies, and because it's the climax of the game. Unfortunately, they can't have like a downbeat moment here.
And here's the thing: the climax of this game, and we're going to get into this. It's basically a beat for beat exact replica of the original game, just padded more.
Mm,
Like
mm,
the original game being remake, not the actual original. Like the climax, it's like you've got the exact same tunnel, you've got all the whispers. Like it's.
mm.
I really there was a lot I didn't like about this, but
Let's get so we'll set out the events as they happen, and then we'll
yes. So
dissect.
so basically, they arrive at this big platform and all the whispers start like coming in and going mental and like Sephiroth
Mm,
appears above their head saying, oh yes, Aerith is inside praying, good for her. Yeah, then again some hinky nonsense. Can't remember exactly what he says. It's fluff, it doesn't matter. and all the whispers come in and basically try to stop you from getting in. Again, the differentiation between the whispers is annoyingly vague. Like, I think there's three different types now. I think there's
Oh
like
God.
Sephiroth ones. I think there's ones that are on our side, and I think there's just generic Destiny ones. I cannot, and I can't. Some of them are white. Some of them are black with white lights in the middle, and some of them are just pure black. And I was like, what is the differentiation here? Anyway, so they form like a wall between the avalanche and the path they need to go on.
Mm.
But the entire group managed to kind of hold a little tunnel open for Cloud to very, very slowly walk through. Don't hurry yourself or anything there.
Yeah.
And he runs through. And this is kind of the thing that everybody's been waiting for in this game.
Mm.
What happens with Aerith?
I was so excited when I was playing this, by the way. Like, I was really like, how, like, because of all the shit they've pulled so far, I was like, what the fuck are you going to do here? So yeah, I was very excited. I have to say, when you get into the center room, it's very beautifully designed. It's sort of like one of the wow moments in the game is when you see it. And
Yeah.
it's because it's a massive room. So yeah, graphics look great.
Yeah. And what ultimately unfolds, I wouldn't say it's a massive disappointment, but it is a slight disappointment. Because I figured this would happen. I don't think there was any way they could avoid killing off Aerith, really. I really didn't like the whole coming down and Cloud manages to save her, and then there's a flash, and it's like they switched realities to a reality where he didn't save her.
Yeah, it gets really confusing here because I don't know if it's essentially multiverse stuff or different timelines or Sephiroth being able to go between the timelines. Whatever happens, I'm really confused.
Massively unclear, and I don't think I think at this point all you're supposed to really register is you're supposed to be. I think you're supposed to be still thinking about the whole thematic thing at the start of this chapter where no matter what choices you make, the results will be the same. And just kind of wave away the fact that even though he did save her, the result was the same. So it's like, don't pay too much attention to the man behind the curtain kind of job. Just like accept the fact that this happened and that's it. And that's lazy. I feel like that could have been done much, much better.
Initially, when I was watching it or playing through this, first of all, I loved when he stopped the blade. I thought, you bastards, you went and did it. You changed the biggest part of this game. Fucking bravo. I thought it was audacious. Like, I wasn't even, like, absorbing what was happening at that moment, but I just thought, like, because I would have taken my hat off to him if they had done that and been like, no, she's not dead. We changed it, you know? Then they sort of had their cake and ate it at the same time and did end up killing her. One thing is, if you haven't played the original, I'd love to talk to someone who just played through this game, how clear it is that Aerith is dead because of all the stuff that happens after this.
At the end, again, I like the ambition behind it because they're doing something interesting. Just the way they try to explain, like, they're trying to be ambiguous, and the fact that we haven't got the third game of the series and we don't know what happens next makes it almost impenetrable. No one really will have any idea what's going on at the end. We'll get to that. I wouldn't say like I hated this, but I was a little deflated by it. I was the whole him stopping Sephiroth with his blade. What I would have liked much, much more would be if he stopped him with his blade and then they had like a battle and there was like a series of events that ultimately led to Aerith still being stabbed. Like not just a flash and no, it happened anyway. Just like an initial deflection. It's like, oh my God, he saved her. But then no, she died anyway. That would have been so much cleaner, nicer, and better. What the hell?
Come on, guys.
What the hell, Michael? No, I'm talking to you, man.
It's really confusing and it doesn't deliver on its promise, really, because it sort of undermines the moment in a way and really further gets undermined by the events that happen after this scene as well.
Yeah.
As in, by events, I mean 1 billion boss fights.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that now. Just just to very quickly list down. So I have the full list of fights that happen after here. Like, how many? One,
Cool.
two, three,
Cool.
4, 5, 6. There are 7 boss fights after this. This is
And you know
insane.
what else is 7?
Ah!
Final Fantasy 7. There you go. Stick that in your pipe.
What if each of these fights is exactly 1 second long, and that's the sequence that Sephiroth was talking about? Amazing. Did you ever think of that?
I just did when you said it out loud. Do you know the thing about it is do you know the thing that annoys me most, right? I get why there's 7 boss fights in the way. Like I know it's not ideal, but it's the climax of this massive game. They wanted to end on huge boss fights. I
Mhm.
get that. What annoys me is they try to replicate that moment from the original where you do that boss fight with Genova and they keep the sad music playing underneath it.
Yeah, that
That
didn't really
doesn't work
work.
because there's so many sound effects happening at the same time that I completely undermine. You can barely hear the sad music over.
Mm.
Yeah, get him! Like all that stuff's happening.
There's a brief moment where you hear it when the white materia drops into the water, and for a brief moment, that's a wonderful recreation where you're like, "Oh,
Mm,
yeah,
mm,
it's working," but then it just gets undermined. So just to run through, I'm just going to list what each of the boss fights are, and then we can talk about them individually. So first, you
mm,
have the Genova life battle. Then Zack and Cloud. Don't think too much about it. Zack and Cloud are fighting Sephiroth on the moon.
mm,
Then it's like Sephiroth Reborn, which is the giant Sephiroth versus Cloud.
mm,
Then Sephiroth Reborn summons Bahamut Arisen, who is fighting the rest of the members of Avalanche minus Cloud.
mm.
Then it's Sephiroth Reborn versus Zack. Then it's Sephiroth Reborn versus Avalanche, like, minus Zack and Cloud. And
Mm.
then finally, it's Sephiroth again on the moon versus Cloud and Aerith. And that's it.
He's in somewhere else in the last one. Sorry to be a pedant. They're in like it
Oh,
looks like where you fight that spider in Bloodborne. That sort of infinite void of water.
oh yeah, I think that's the last one. Yeah, that
Yeah.
one. Yeah, so these just get lost in the mix. I think the most memorable one of these is the one where you're playing as Zack and Cloud on the moon
Mm.
versus Sephiroth, because this is the first time really you've got a good chance to play as Cloud, or not as Cloud, as Zack. Will say I do not like the mechanics behind Zack. The fact that you have to charge his attacks,
Yeah.
hated that.
No, I didn't either. And it felt like this moment happened as a bit of fan service. It probably
Yeah.
wasn't necessary. That's the only reason. It was like, imagine Cloud and Zack fighting together against Sephiroth. That'd be so cool. And it's like, do you think they wanted 7? Do you think they padded it out to 7 deliberately? It wasn't until we started talking about it that I think they might have, because like,
Yeah,
why do we fight that Bahamut?
I think you might be onto something. One thing I did think of actually, though, when I was looking again, when I was rewatching on YouTube to kind of figure this out, I realized Sephiroth Reborn, they fight against him 4 separate times, and I realized. So in my head, when I was playing it first, I thought you were fighting it one after another, but I realized you're actually fighting him on different planes of existence.
Mm,
So like Zack and Cloud are fighting him like separately to the rest of Avalanche. They're in 2 separate worlds at that point,
mm,
and it just kind of jumps between the two. So it's not like you're fighting them one after another. Like both of you are fighting him at the same time, but in just on different in different worlds. Again, it's kind of a cool idea, but just doesn't add much.
yeah.
It's just, again, it's padding, as you said.
One thing just to point out as well, the tone gets absolutely fucked by this because you
Yeah.
have what's a sad moment, and there are elements of the air death in this that are sad still. Like I think there are some emotive parts of the and like you were saying, the materia falling down into the water is still a very affecting image. But then
Hmm.
like it's undermined by this boss rush and by the tone of the boss fights as well. Like when you're fighting Genova, there's a bit where it's transitioning to the next fight, and there's like a cutscene where everybody's attacking it as it falls through the air, and Cat says something like, "Mind if we drop in?" Like a really cheesy line like
Yeah.
that, and that it just undermines the sad moment that happened. I do think that some of these fights in isolation are really good.
The gameplay itself is quite good. It's just like
Mm.
tonally, it's just like a train wreck.
I quite like the last fight actually, the Aerith and
Mm.
Cloud against Sephiroth. I do like in these weird matchups where you're fighting one guy with like two party members or one party member or something. That can be interesting. But by that point, you've fought so many boss battles. Oh, and I got that thing. I think we
Mm.
talked about it before, where if you die, um, in a boss fight, it gives you a message that's very confusingly worded.
Yeah,
And I accidentally went back to the very beginning, so back to the Genova fight.
that
So
would crush me.
I was on the seventh fight, and I went back to the first fight. So I was very annoyed by that by the end.
That would be absolutely crushing. I don't think I could handle that at all. Um, yeah, like it's the fights themselves, they're entertaining, but it's so much compared to the original game. Like the elegance of fighting just Genova and the fact that it's turn-based battles. You know, no one's doing somersaults, no one's doing quips. It's just
Mm.
oh shit, like Ares is dead, and now you just have a boss battle to deal with as well while you're considering this. And all you're doing is button inputs. Inputs. You don't have to like dodge stuff. You don't have to do anything like that. It's just like you're just letting it sink in while you're fighting this battle, and it's effective there. Here, it's just all over the place. Now, I will say there is an extra layer to this that I feel like they kind of recover at the very end. Are we okay to jump past this boss battle into the actual
Yeah,
ending now?
yeah, of
Okay.
course, yeah.
So at the very end, now we have a couple of scenes to get through here before we jump back to the gang. First of all, we go to Rufus, and he has that moment with Glenn.
Glenn, I'll never get over that name. Sorry.
This Glenn, you bastard.
Yeah.
Yeah, Glenn is just one of these characters who they keep trying to introduce characters from the compilation of Final Fantasy VII that I just
Mm.
don't care about. So we talked about this before, and I can't remember if we mentioned this, but I found out he's from Ever Crisis.
You were
The
saying,
app.
yeah.
Yeah, and I have no interest in Ever Crisis. So I don't know anybody. Like, is anybody going, woo, wow, Glenn in HD, amazing.
I'd be very like it's just a hardcore people, but he gets too much. Like I get what they're doing; they're setting up Wu Tai for the next game, and that's cool
Yeah.
and all. But why this guy? I don't know. I guess to show that Sephiroth is manipulating the political
Yeah,
things
it's got
that
its
are
claws
happening.
and everything.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
to that end, yes, I guess, but it didn't need to be Glenn.
No, Glenn. I do kind of like the idea that like he's messing with Rufus's head as well, though. I think that
Yeah.
could lead to some very interesting things in the next game. So Glenn raised more questions than he answered, so it's kind of like meh, but the Rufus bit I liked. Then we have a scene of some of the weapons and whispers like swimming underwater.
Mm.
This added nothing for me. As I said before, I really don't like the design of the weapons in this game, and it just reminded me of that. So for that, I didn't hate it, but it added nothing. Anything to add?
No, not really. I can't remember why we see that scene. Are they getting corrupted, or is it to show they're still alive or something? I can't
I have
remember.
no idea. I don't think it adds anything.
Yeah.
Then we have what's probably a relevant scene. We have Zack in the church, and this is basically after the battle. And he's saying, like, oh, that wasn't a dream. That really happened. And then he has this moment of, who's to say our worlds won't collide again? And it's basically, again, this for me is Square Enix like dipping their toe in the waters as if to say, like, so did you guys like that? Should we add him in again? We don't know, you
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
I kind of hope they don't. But if they do, I hope it's just kind of definitive, like, he's dead again. Like, let Zack die.
Let's
Basically.
Zack die. I love the tone of Zack in that scene is so weird as well. He's just been through something insane. He's traveled to like 3 different worlds in 10 minutes and fought like gods. And then he's back in the church and his tone is sort of like, well, that escalated quickly. You know, he's a bit like nonchalant about it.
Yeah, like I could absolutely see him going out and buying a hot dog immediately after that scene.
Yeah.
Like he does not give a fuck. Yeah, then we have a scene in Nibelheim and we see a bunch of the Black Robes heading to the reunion. I like that. I think that's good. I think we also get a peek at Roach at that scene. I can't remember if we do or not.
Yes, yeah.
He might be dotted in there somewhere. But again, this is really nice foreshadowing for what we know is going to be a very big part of the next game. And I like that. I like the way they built that up. And And then it's back to the gang. Now, this final scene is a biggie. This is something we
Mm,
have to talk about.
mm,
They are in the Forgotten City, and there's one bit of this I really, really like. So at this point, Cloud, it's kind of ambiguous as to whether he's just a nut job or he's kind of got 2 feet in two separate worlds. But
mm-hmm.
basically, he can see Aerith still around. Like, this is her
Yeah,
spirit, this is a hallucination, this is her actually alive, but in on a different plane. It's not clear. But I like this because this both serves the plot of the original game where Cloud is kind of losing it, but it also adds something because you're like, oh, but this could also feed into the multiverse. This is one of the few points where I think the multiverse bit kind of works,
I
where
agree.
it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, oh, like, is she here? Is she not? It's ambiguous, but for once, it's in a good way. I'm like, we don't really know what's happening with Earth right now, and that feels good.
It I choose to engage with this point on the ways I want. So for let me explain that a
Mm,
bit better. I like I was saying, I really like the way the story, the original game and this game story sort of takes things that are real world and like disassociation and I guess psychosis and stuff like that, and tries to use it in a narrative way. I prefer this as a reflection of Cloud not coming to terms with loss. So he's refusing to believe that she's dead. So that's
mm,
why he's seeing her. Um, but it can be very easily explained as a multiverse thing, and that's fine too. Like it doesn't harm my enjoyment of it to do that. But
mm,
I agree. I really like the framing of this as well. Um, this is jumping ahead, but in the scene where they're fixing the tiny Bronco, the way Eris is framed is very subtly off-putting
mm.
and disturbing. Like in the distance, there's just certain shots for. I'll put it up in the YouTube video that are eerie in a way because you
Hinky,
know
you
she
could
shouldn't
almost
be
say.
there. Hinky, yeah, it's got the hinky filter over it.
Mm,
Um, that aspect of it I quite like, and that moment that like you see Cloud. Barrett says something when they're by the water in the Forgotten Capital, and he says, "Okay, I guess we better get going." And Cloud's like, "Okay, cool," because he's
mm.
obviously not after processing what's happened. And then he
Yeah,
turns around and says, "Hey, Tifa, you coming?" And she's obviously like still in this, still
yeah.
feeling the loss, and is 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 more of the human element of it. So it's very eloquently in a way setting up the conflict of the third game, as in Cloud getting drawn closer to it and Tifa trying to bring him back.
It's kind of bloody amazing how they went from the absolute clusterfuck that just preceded it to a scene that actually works really, really well. Like that
Yeah.
scene you
That's this
mentioned with
game in a microcosm, really, isn't it?
it
Like
is.
they keep pulling you back in with something good. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Like I just performed brain surgery, but then I tripped over my shoes. Like that kind of thing, you
yeah,
know? It's really
yeah,
bizarre. That scene you talk about with Tifa is exceptionally well done because
mm,
he says to her, "Is like Tifa, come on, let's go." And while he says that, the camera is focused on him and Aerith right beside him, and they're looking like really like it's a. If you took that out of context, that's just like a happy image. It's just two people looking at their friend. Then like Tifa slowly gets up and looks back, and it's the exact same shot minus Aerith. And
mm,
in context, it's so disturbing because you're looking at like Cloud, who just looks like really cheerful and happy. And for Tifa, from her perspective, like she's probably incredibly concerned for Cloud, which she would be around this point, that he's just losing it completely.
mm,
Um, yeah, exceptionally well done. And yeah, the bit at the end is it's very emotionally confusing. Like
mm.
you really don't know how you're supposed to feel at the end credits of this.
I think this is one point where I'll give them their flowers, give them the plaudits. I think you're meant to feel unsettled by the ending,
Yeah.
which is a very weird tone to end on. And like they sort of undermine it by having the song at the end. Um, but I think you're meant to be, this isn't right. Like I can see her there. There's something wrong about this. Like Cloud's attitude is wrong. There, it's just a weird feeling to end on.
I think it's like the way they do it, they direct the scene like it's a happy scene, but because of
Mm.
context, we know it's not happy, you know? It'd be like, playing the banana splits over the finale of Schindler's List or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
It's exactly like that. Did that not
it
happen in that
is
film? Actually, yeah. I think you're
director's
wrong.
cut.
Yeah.
um yeah, it's a great scene because like it sticks with you. It really sticks with you. And
Mm.
even the setting is really good because they're in this massive, expansive like ravine slash field that doesn't look like it belongs anywhere on the map. It
Mm.
looks almost heavenly, you could
Yeah,
say.
it's idyllic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. And I think you are right. I think you're onto something there that you are supposed to come out of it feeling very unsettled by what you've just seen because everybody is like particularly Barrett and Tifa, they know stuff is up.
Mm.
Tifa knows
Yeah.
more than Barrett does, but Barrett, he's kind of like, okay, we trust you, but he clearly does not trust Cloud. And Cloud is so spacey at this point.
Mm.
It's just it does get under your skin a little bit. So it almost seems to be delving into like kind of horror-y territory.
I
Like,
think there's certain shots of Eric that have a really uncanny sort of feeling to them that like it completely skirts the line of horror. I don't know how
hmm,
far they'll take that, but like just because of, and it's really good because it's contextual. It's only because of the knowledge we have that things seem unsettling.
yeah. Yeah, you're right. And like this is the thing. I think this last scene is one of the best directed scenes in the entire game. Like because if any scene should stick with you, it should be the last scene. And so many games fuck up their last scene. Like they're really forgettable. This is memorable. This
Mm.
sticks with you. This is something that really, really hammers home that you're not going to know what to expect at the end of it. And they do kind of screw it up a little bit at the very end because when it fades to black, they've got like a placard that says like who knows what will happen at Journey's End. It's like, guys, you did not need that. You could have just left
Yeah,
it blank. Like, why did you have to fucking do that? But anyway, but yeah, that's the game.
that's Rebirth.
That's
Yeah.
Rebirth, baby. Um, pretty sure Cloud says that at the end.
That's the title card at the end, isn't it?
Yeah,
With
that's
three
Rebirth, baby.
exclamation marks. Do you
um,
should we give final thoughts or overall thoughts on the game, I guess?
yeah, you go first because yours are probably more interesting than mine.
No, well, I doubt it.
Oh, stop.
Prepare for a rambling. But it's really tricky, right?
Yeah.
Because there are points. I think this game is great, and I mean great with a capital G, as in will be a game that's remembered for years and years to come.
Mm,
There's never been anything made like this on this scale. Like it's simultaneously the biggest JRPG ever made. As in, this is probably the most expensive JRPG ever made.
mm,
The sort of what's the word, maximalist design approach is insane to the
mm.
point of like there being so many rabbit holes that you can go down in terms of mini games and side quests and incidental detail. That's like it's like when you look up at a huge building and you're like, how did somebody build this? It's got that element of it. It's also incredibly misguided at times
Mm.
and clunkily done. And those excesses I talk about aren't always positives. To the point where they're probably more negative than positive as an overall experience, as in the pacing is fucked in the game.
Yeah.
The tone is fucked in the game, or the tonal whiplash is fucked in the game, I should say.
Mm.
But it's sort of like that thing at the end where we're talking about, you were saying, oh God, this is such an amazing scene and it came after such a bad scene. And that sort of sums it up, as in they keep bringing you back. They keep like doing something amazing that draws you back in, something unexpected or just very well done or audacious. And I like that. I like games like, what other game of this size and budget and scale would have the central character, like a main point of the game being the central character going through like a mental breakdown,
Mm.
and that being reflected in the, not just the themes of the game, but like the narrative mechanics with all the multiverse stuff as well. Like incredibly ambitious and brave stuff because they're building off the template of a very brave game that came out in '97. So I think it's a landmark game. I don't know if it's very fun to play at times. I don't know if it's very well made at times, but I think it's one of those um, ones that will have reverberations throughout the genre and the art form, I guess.
Are you done?
Yes.
Just to quote Cloud's line there at that point. I pretty much agree with you 100%, man. There's very little I would say differently. Yeah, for tonal whiplash is a term that I absolutely think is worth applying here. For
Mm,
every like in a microcosm, like you could sum it all up in the Cosmo Canyon, the Geen attacks cave, like where they have that incredible moment where they expand on the history of the Gi, and it's like
mm.
really really fascinating. But then by the same token, you also have around this point when Nanaki's voice changes, and I was like, why did you do that? Like, they
Yeah.
keep, for every good idea they have an equal bad idea, and it's just all over the place. It might have worked a little bit better if well, bear with me on this one, right? But if it wasn't Final Fantasy VII and if it was just a JRPG and they weren't restricted to the narrative of Final Fantasy VII, this might have worked, because so many modern games now are playgrounds as opposed to single, like, uh linear narrative experience. And this is the thing. Final Fantasy VII was a relatively linear narrative experience, and this game is much more of an open world playground. And those
Yeah.
two don't mesh together particularly well. And as you say, I would love to foresee what it would be like for someone who has never played the original, how they react to it. Would they get the tonal whiplash that we're getting, or would they be able to enjoy it just on the big, open, fun world that, I think Square Enix are trying to push upon us? It's hard to say. But yeah, I think what I would ideally like to happen is when they finally finish this Final Fantasy VII remake trilogy or whatever. I'm still a little unsure if they can make it in a trilogy. They might have to expand it to a fourth game, but we'll see. I
Mm,
would love it when they finish the entire thing, if they kind of like Ridley Scott director's cut it all, so that it just takes out all the shit and leaves in all the good and
yeah.
makes something much more streamlined. I think that game would be one of the greatest games ever made. But as it stands now, one of the best games ever made here is kind of sitting directly on alongside one of the worst games ever made, but it's been mixed up together. And yeah, the badness kind of taints the good side of it, but it's still a really impressive achievement. Like that ending we talked about, like some scenes they do better than the original. Like it's, some parts of it are incredibly fun. The traversal
Mm.
at the start, in particular, the battle systems, like so much of it is a triumph. It's just unfortunate that there's some bullshit areas in there as well.
It's frustrating in a way, isn't it? It's just like, God, I wish I could hate you more, but you keep doing good stuff as well. Like it's just,
Yeah.
it would be almost a simpler sort of thing to sit in your mind and say, "Oh, this is terrible. They really dropped the ball on this," because it's not. That's not true either. Like,
No, Rebirth is kind of an abusive girlfriend or abusive boyfriend of a game, because like every time you think like, well, fuck this, I'm not playing this anymore, it'll
yeah,
turn around
yeah,
and be like, yeah, but what about Queen's Blood though?
yeah.
And you're
Oh
like,
God,
oh,
Queen's Blood. Yeah, of
yeah.
course. Another thing that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just every time you think you've had enough, it brings you back with something amazing. And then just when
Mm,
you think like that's going to be how it is from now on, they drag you back down with like hinky nonsense. And it's just,
yeah.
get away from me with all this. So
Mm,
it's mixed. I think my overall impression though is positive. I'm very much
yeah.
aware of the faults, but I overall enjoyed this game despite its faults.
Yeah. Me too. Me too. And like, we wouldn't have put the hours in if we didn't want to. Like, I played that game more than any other game I played in the last I don't know how many years. Um, so yeah, yeah, really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed discussing it with you for I don't know how many hours this podcast has become.
Jesus, this is probably like worth the first four chapters, maybe easily. Like, yeah, but
Yeah, yeah,
I really enjoyed it too. It was, I mean, we were saying this before. Like, I think as we were playing the game, we kept saying, "I can't wait to talk about this endlessly
yeah.
over podcast." But oh, I forgot to tell you one more conspiracy theory.
Do it. That's a
So
good note to end on as a
it
conspiracy
is,
theory, actually.
and people listening at home, you can tell me now if you think this might be the case as well. So I actually heard about this online, but someone told me that the Sephiroth in this game is not the Sephiroth of the original game, but is in fact the Sephiroth from the end of Advent Children, and that at the very end he just kind of disappears. He doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily die, and they think that he went back in time slash multiverse to kind of change events because he sees that he can't win here, so he's going back in time to kind of change events that way.
How the fuck are they going to? Because you know what, Steve? I wouldn't be surprised if that's true.
I wouldn't
I
be
would not
surprised at
be
all.
fucking surprised.
I think that has far more credence than the 7 seconds till the end thing that I had earlier. I think that could I genuinely think that probably will be what that is, to be
God,
honest.
that's insane. But how do you like? I get why. Okay, they incorporate some of the side games and compilation stuff. That's fine. How do you incorporate the sequel to the game in a remake of the original? That's insane.
I like how I brought up time travel, but that's the thing you got hung up on.
Yeah.
Because like, there's no point in this where time travel is a viable option, but you're like, yeah, Final Fantasy, yeah, so whatever, fine. I guess when you've got multiverses, time travel is like a paddling pool equivalent. Like whatever, time travel. Should I do that before breakfast
Yeah, that's true.
or after
That's
breakfast? Anyway, on that bombshell, yeah, thank you very much. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this as much as we did rambling on about it. It is a bit of a mess, and this was all kind of contemplation, conspiracy theory, volleyballing around. But hey, it was fun, and hope you guys enjoyed it too. I guess we'll talk to you when Final Fantasy Revolutions comes out.
Revengeance comes out.
Revengeance, yeah. All right. Well, listen. Talk to you then. Bye bye.